some point, and we will be making up for it because you're right. We're hitting the airwaves at 7 o'clock here, which means we're going to 11 today here on KNBR, the sports leader, getting you up to the Pinstripe Bowl. What can you tell me, Guy, in 5 seconds or less about Rutgers versus Miami?
Yeah, Giancarlo Stanton out for this game, not available. I know it's going to shock you, but he is hamstring. No Giancarlo in the Pinstripe Bowl today.
Yeah, Aaron Judge also an inactive. Not a
Aaron Judge
scratch,
also out, but that's more That's more rest. Giancarlo.
So he is
out.
a healthy scratch.
Yeah, he's just getting a day.
Okay.
Giancarlo not available.
So yeah, we're with you for the next 4 hours here on KNBR, and we'll get you up into the Pinstripe Bowl. There's a lot of college football here today on the Sports Leader. The Pop-Tarts Bowl is coming up.
Did you see their trophy?
That's a real name? Is it a big Pop-Tart?
Yeah, Pop-Tarts are back, or never left, but their trophy, the top of the trophy is the ball, and then out of the ball there's 2 toaster slots where you can put the Pop-Tart.
I always enjoyed going just non-cooked Pop-Tart. You ever do that?
Please. With the icing? Yeah. I mean, the less amount of work, the better. It was how
right.
I thought about food till now.
Well, it got to the point where it's just who needs to heat it up? That just means you might have to eat it slower because it's a little too hot with all the the gooey fruit center.
I don't want to get off. We got some Niner stuff. We got Warriors. We got a bunch of stuff. That was also my outlook on ramen noodles. Believe it or not, dry.
Yeah, I didn't. We don't share that one.
All right, let's move on.
We definitely don't share that one. Pop-Tarts Bowl, and then the Alamo Bowl is coming up between Arizona and Oklahoma, and that's going to lead up to Dubs OT, which is tonight right here on the Sports Leader. Dubs OT with JD following the Warriors and the Miami Heat. So good one for the Dubs. First of 7 at home. So Golden State, they get back to 500. I know we're going to get into everything that's been going on with Jonathan Kuminga as he continues to be kind of a lightning rod in terms of conversation among the Warriors fan base. But the Warriors are playing better. They had dipped to 10-14. They have now won 5 of the last 6 to get to 15-15. They did lose on Christmas in Denver to the Nuggets, but back at it with an opportunity to separate, and they've been playing great on the home floor after a horrible start, the 1-6 start to the Warriors season on the Chase Center hardwood, but they're riding an 8-game winning streak at home, and now the next 7 between tonight and January the 10th are all going to be at home. So big stretch for the Warriors. We'll get into some Dubs conversation, but yeah, Dubs OT with yours truly coming up tonight here on the Sports Leader at 9:30 following the Warriors and the Heat. And so, we'll get into some Dubs. Do want to start with the Niners. We got a great show with Greg Cosell, the NFL analyst and senior producer of NFL Films. He's going to join us coming up at 7:35. Just one of the greats in the business of breaking down film, breaking down tape. The perfect guy to have on after the 4-interception Brock Purdy game, Guy, to just dig deep into what Brock didn't do, what the Ravens did do, and just how the 49ers continue to separate and improve with a big game at Washington on Sunday.
I mean, we could spend the time with him just talking about the 4 picks, I think. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, JD. I thought of the 4 interceptions. It was pretty easy to identify the 2 that were bad decisions and then the other 2 that were a little more freaky. But one, I don't know if we'll get to everything that we have for him. But one of the things I do want to try to get to with him is the interception that occurred when Brock tried to throw that quick short pass to the left, and it got batted straight up in the air, and then Marlon Humphrey intercepted it. Not the ball that he got hit on, not the ball with all the flags, and not the ball in the end zone. But you may remember the interception that I'm talking about. And initially, I kind of categorized it as freaky interception, but watching it again a few more times this morning, I wonder if there was an element of decision making there that Greg would have preferred he do something else with the ball, or at least that the Ravens should deserve some more credit than just calling it a freaky interception, because when you watch the defensive back on that play, he really breaks down. Like, he knows what Brock is about to do. It's not just an inadvertent hand up, got lucky. He stops the rush. He plants. He jumps. He makes it really hard for Purdy to throw around him or over him or through him. And then the ball goes straight up in the air, and Marlon Humphrey's there for the pick. And I do wonder if that one should go in the category of Mike Macdonald beating Kyle Shanahan, or if it's, there was another way to just throw that. It was the right play. You just got to throw it different. You got to pump. You got to move. You got to create a lane. Whatever. I don't know. But that specific interception. You remember the interception I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
I had it in the freaky category, and upon the rewatch, I might have to move it into the category with the other two. It's just like that's a legitimate NFL, you got beat on that play. So that you may need to watch it a couple times to weigh in on that, or maybe you just know it. But I know he'll have an opinion on it. So that's one of my questions for Greg. And the other thing, John, rewatching is just that was not my Greg Pop impression there, John. But the other thing, John, just rewatching it, is my other opinion. One of the other opinions coming out of the game was 4 interceptions lost in the game, which, how could 4 interceptions not lose you a game? But then you go back, and even down 30-12 at the end of the third quarter, in the middle of the third quarter, not the end of the third quarter, with like 9 minutes left in the third quarter, then down 33-12 to start the fourth quarter. When you remove kind of the moment when you're watching the game going, oh, this is a disaster. And you just see some of the things they could have done and did not do. Debo with a drop on 3rd and 8 near midfield, down 30-12. Then they're down 33-12 because the Ravens kicked the field goal, and they start that drive. They started 3 different drives with huge Kittle plays. They start that drive with a big Kittle play over the middle, beautiful throw, 16, 17 yards. And they get down to they're in the red zone. They run McCaffrey down to the 25, and the play gets called back because of the Ayuk hold. And then instead of 1st and 10 at the 25, it's 2nd and 11, like at midfield. And nothing happens. And then it's 3rd and 11 and incomplete to Debo. Then they go for it on 4th and 11, and that is the no-look McCaffrey toss play with a Purdy falling down, throwing it back over his shoulder. And that, maybe that really felt like game. But the point being, there were other things that happened. It was a little unbelievable to me rewatching it that they still had chances to truly not kind of fake get back in the game, to really get back in that game. We're talking in the third quarter, and it didn't happen. So I want to know from Greg Cosell, is it more complicated than just you threw 4 picks and you just don't win games when you throw 4 picks? I don't know. We'll see what he says.
Yeah, and they did have a shot, even with Darnold in there. 1st and goal at the 1. that felt
a little. I guess what I'm saying is that felt a little less legitimate than when you've got 9 minutes left in the third quarter. You know what I mean?
It did, but it also goes to show you, I think, how difficult it is to kill off the 49ers in a game where, for the most part, they've been awful. Because we were going back and forth, and I was going back and forth with a few people as I'm getting ready to go down to the post-game press conference. And it's, this thing's about to be 33-26 north of the 2-minute warning, with the 49ers having all 3 of their timeouts. If they had been able to manage it right, they weren't able to manage it right. The 1st and goal at the 1 turned into, fourth and goal at the 12 or whatever it was, due to a pretty bad sack taken by Sam Darnold. And a lot of that was the offensive line's inability to hold up. But no, I'm with the general point that the Niners were still very much in the game if they had been able to put one of those other drives together in the third quarter where they were outscored 17-0. 808 KNBR is the number. It's John Dickinson and Guy Haberman here in for Murph and Marcus on the Sports Leader. We're with you until 11 today. Again, special edition, expanded holiday edition until we get you up until a lot of bowl games coming up here on the Sports Leader. Greg Cosell, 7:35. We're also going to talk to Matt Maiocco coming up at 9:15. And injury
do we play
report.
His jingle? Do we play his jingle on this show? Or is that
it made an appearance? No, I've heard it. Yeah, okay. Tony doing a great job. No, I've heard not the full, but I've heard a clip of it one of the days that I was in for John Lund with Greg Papa. It was put out there a little bit on that day as they kind of reminisced about the the JD song.
I'm not here to reminisce, but
no, it was just hey, we're playing the JD song, but that may not be Derek Papa's best work. So
got it. All right, well, forget it. We're not here to.
That was the sort of that was the internal conversation. So I don't know if that makes you more or less inclined to actually want to roll that out. Yeah. I tend to be with you on that. It's like once it turns into something that it doesn't need to be, then it's time to just turn the whole conversation off. Anyway, he's Guy Haberman. I'm John Dickinson. We'll get into the Niner injury report and what Kyle Shanahan had to say. The 49ers were back on the practice field yesterday, although they did not have a practice. Walkthrough only. We'll give you the updates coming up on Trent Williams and Jalen Moore and Eric Armstead and somebody that we didn't think was going to be on the injury report that suddenly popped up and could be out for a while. We'll get into that coming up. It's John Dickinson, Guy Haberman, in for Murph and Marcus. It's KNBR 104.5 and 680, the sports leader.
Redwood City. Shout out to you for supporting KNBR, Redwood City's sports leader.
From the Chilton Auto Body Traffic Desk. And now, time for the Protect Your Assets with David Hollander Business and Technology Report. Good morning, Seamheads. Murph and Marcus keep rolling. Streaming live at twitch.tv/thesportsleader.
All right, the guys who won't practice today, Eric Armstead, foot, knee. Juwan Jennings, concussion. Aaron Banks, toe. Jalen Moore, concussion. One you guys didn't get from yesterday, I believe. Jair Brown has knee sprain. He won't practice today. Debo has a neck, which will be limited. The other guys who are limited, Javon Hargrave, hamstring. Oren Burks, knee. Ambry Thomas, knee, hand. Trent Williams, groin. Debo, neck.
All right, Kyle Shanahan reading the lengthy 49ers injury report coming off of the game against the Ravens. It's John Dickinson and Guy Haberman.
Can we try that again with like some hard rock or some rap music or something? Like, can we do the injury? Can we do the injury report, which the music matched the injury report? But can we do the injury report with some music that doesn't match the injury report? So at least, no one's ever come back from a commercial break in the history of radio with an injury report. It's never been done. Well, Tony just made radio history, okay? And to be clear, this sounds like criticism, Tony. It's not criticism. It needed to be done.
It worked.
It may have been, maybe
it just may have been more entertaining.
Try it again. Yeah, with Boys of Summer or something.
Which version? You want the Ataris or do you want Don Henley?
Which one of those is the worst, JD? Which one of those injuries is the worst? He named 2 offensive linemen. He did not name Trent Williams.
Well, I'm going with, and Trent Williams, by the way, a limited participant at the practice that they
he did say
have
Trent
yesterday.
At the end, didn't he? He said Trent.
He did at the very end. Yeah. Okay. Here were the limiteds. Just to recap, and I'll give you the limiteds first, and then we'll get to what I think could be the most significant, aside from Trent Williams, who I think we would both agree is the most significant. He's Oren Burks, who they're expecting to get back. That's actually a positive that he's a limited. Dwelly's been out.
We need some rock music here. We need something.
Hargrave played, but now he's obviously got the hamstring thing. Debo with the neck. Ambry Thomas could be out for a bit, although limited, I think is a good sign on Ambry Thomas. And then Trent Williams with the groin. And Trent said after the game on Monday night that he'll be good. So I think Trent Williams at this point is probably trending toward being able to play.
No, not Stairway to Heaven. Something else.
It's a little slow. It's a little slow build.
Something that makes no sense, Tony, is what I'm asking for. Something that makes no sense for this.
Like, I want to rock. Something like that.
There you go. I mean,
Trent Williams is the most significant. Trent Williams is the most significant, without a doubt. I think Ambry Thomas is pretty significant. What about Jair Brown? Like, we knew about Jalen Moore. We knew about Jennings. Yeah.
Eric Armstead, foot and knee.
I mean, yeah.
Juwan Jennings, concussion. Aaron Banks,
toe.
Jalen Moore, concussion. All right, that's 2 out of 4 concussions right there, JD. That's not good. Debo
good.
Samuel, and Nick. Hargrave, hamstring. Burks, knee.
Little ding.
Ambry.
He's dinged.
Knee and hand. Trent Williams, groin. Debo, neck. I said Debo twice, but all right.
By the way, Brock Purdy was on the injury report. I think he had to be because he didn't finish the game, and now we're heading toward the next game. But Brock Purdy was formally listed. Brock Purdy, left shoulder, which obviously that's the stinger, but officially on the injury report. I know we love parsing through those and what does it all mean. But, full participant in the mythical practice that was really a walkthrough that the 49ers didn't have on Wednesday. So, Jair Brown is the one for me because, as Kyle Shanahan said, a couple of you guys didn't get the other night. So, Jair Brown, that has the potential, I think, to be a problem guy.
I mean, he's the replacement. He's here because of an injury, and thankfully he was here. I thought he was playing pretty well. But if he can't go, I came out of the game thinking secondary's fine. Like I told you to start the show.
Other than Gibson. Gibson had a rough game.
Yeah, Gibson had a rough game, but he's been good. I mean, he's been fine. Like, I think their secondary is fine. When I say fine, I mean, can they win a Super Bowl with this defense? The answer is yes. I think. I don't know if they will or not. They're down 30-12 to start the fourth quarter. The game finished, they gave up 33. I mean, they're down 30-12 halfway through the third quarter. They were, I thought it was okay. Now, part of that, the game changes a little bit with that score, but I mean, it all begins to it does feel a little bit like, are these injuries piling up right now for a team that had been relatively healthy? Not totally healthy, nobody is, but relatively healthy. Armstead's hurt, is not, the Armstead injury, these things with him sometimes. He's got multiple injuries. The foot is the thing that's the problem with him. Hargrave's back, but was battling something. Trent's battling. He may play. I would expect him to play, but he's battling. Remember when Ward played against Arizona? It was like, oh, Mooney Ward's back. Okay, that's good because he had the groin. Hufunga's out, so Jair Brown steps in. Ambry Thomas gets banged up. I don't know. It does. I feel like it's on the verge, at least, if it's not already, of piling up on this defense. But
I mean, it had been their Achilles heel in the 3-game losing streak. Injuries, I think, really both ways, but more so injuries to the offense. Now they're piling up defensively once you start to separate from Trent Williams. And look, I even think a guy like Juwan Jennings was tough to not have for the 49ers. They do tend to be the kind of team guy that needs to have everything. It needs to have the pieces in the right place. And if they're not, it takes them a couple of weeks to kind of figure out what they need to do to be able to account for it. And right now, the 49ers don't have a couple of weeks. They either need guys to kind of grind through, and I think that's what Trent Williams probably will do, or they're going to have to find acceptable, suitable replacements to be able to go to Washington on Sunday morning and get the victory, which, we talked about it yesterday. To me, it's a no excuses week still for the 49ers. Go handle your business. Hopefully don't lose anybody significant in that game, and then set up the final game against the Rams is the game that can get you the 1 seed. And then you've really got an opportunity to lock in with the bye week if you can earn it and get a couple of weeks to get as healthy as you possibly can be, while knowing you're going to play one fewer game and then, take your chances with the 2 home games. So I think this week, though, Guy, is starting to feel like the week that they're just going to have to hold it together, especially with the 1 day short, coming off of the Monday night and the travel across the country and playing the 10 a.m. body clock game.
First of all, I was wrong to not. The Juwan Jennings is just as significant, right? I mean, he is on the all underrated team. It feels like I don't think he's underrated around here, but he's on the all underrated team. It feels like his percentage of catches that are clutch, it's like 80%, right? It was just like, who's going to make a play?
Purdy was throwing balls to Snead. Purdy was throwing balls to Willie Snead in situations that probably would have gone to Juwan Jennings. Jennings is always blocking in the run game. That's a more significant loss than I think meets the eye, no doubt.
Yeah, you and I were there. We saw Snead a lot in camp. It's not like he's new to this team. He's been around, but Juwan Jennings has a physicality to him. And I said it yesterday, you just wonder on the ball that Purdy threw off the defensive back's face on that corner blitz that was intended for Snead, does Juwan Jennings get out of that break in a way that Snead doesn't? I don't know. But yeah, so there's that. The other thing on Jair Brown, you didn't hear it in the clip, I don't think, but Kyle Shanahan asked, is there a concern as long-term? He said there's concern. He's not ruled out yet for this week, so he still could play, but there is concern. So, I mean, that's on the list of, Trent is one to watch, but feels like he's coming. The Jair Brown one is one to really watch. Like, what happens today? What happens tomorrow? They add a couple days ago Sebastian Joseph Day, who's in his physical prime, 28 years old. He's won. He was a team captain, so he fits the bill for them. I not typically the kind of guy I would think you don't get at this time of the season. So he's a good player, but he's the Armstead injury. Can they win a championship without Eric Armstead? I think they can, but I'd prefer not to try.
It'd be pretty tough, and I think they're trying to get Armstead to a point where him coming back before the end of the regular season doesn't prevent him from having to miss playoff games. I think that's where the maintenance is on Armstead, and I think they'd prefer to try to be able to lock up the 1 seed without him having to get on the field. Quickly, before we pause, and we got Greg Cosell, who's going to be coming up here on The Sports Leader. Just the question, what are your options at safety if Jair can't go? That was the question I'm reading from the Kyle Shanahan transcript. Shanahan says, well, we've got someone on practice squad. We've moved other positions there, a nickel and corner, to have some depth there. We've got some options. So there you go. That's not exactly and we can parse through that if Jair Brown can't go and what it all means between now and 11 o'clock. But that's, they know the options, but that leads me down the path of you might not love the options at this point behind Jair Brown if you're a 49ers fan. So we'll pause here. We'll come back. Greg Cosell is going to join us, the great Greg Cosell, one of the legends in terms of breaking down the film. That's all straight ahead. It's John Dickinson and Guy Haberman in for Murph and Marcus. KNBR 104.5 and 680, the sports leader.
faithful, time for Murph and Marcus to talk game tape with Greg Cosell of NFL Films and streaming live on KNBR.com and the KNBR app.
I thought the biggest thing for Brock was the way it went in the first half. I thought, just between Brock and I just talking, where I thought he struggled the most was after the 4 picks. I thought his first pick was a bad mistake. I thought the next 3 were unfortunate ones that, make excuses for. There's just tough football plays, and they made some good football plays. But it's tough to play a lot of football after you have 4 picks and stuff, especially when you're down versus that type of defense. And I think that was the best experience for him, how to feel that, to know what's happened, to know why it's happened, and still have to go out there and sling it around and play. And I think that's the best experience you can get from that game.
All right, Kyle Shanahan dissecting Brock Purdy's game and the 4 interception performance against the Ravens. Ravens beat the Niners 33-19. We welcome you back. It's John Dickinson and Guy Haberman sitting in for Murph and Marcus here on the Sports Leader. Let's go out now to the UMA guest line, and it's a pleasure to be joined by Greg Cosell, NFL analyst, senior producer, NFL Films. Let's dive right into it, Greg. Thanks a lot for coming on. I'm John, he's Guy, and we really appreciate the time.
Hey, no, great to be talking with you. And by the way, I agree with everything Kyle Shanahan said.
Yeah, let's start right there. Let's just go through. Every interception has a story, right? Let's just go through the first interception, what Kyle had to say about it. I mean, that's the one that I think everybody agrees was the worst decision of the 4. So just what did you see as far as what the Ravens did and what Brock saw or didn't see on interception number 1?
Well, the Ravens were in a too-high shell, and he looked to his right on his drop back. Purdy did, and there were no routes that were really available to his right, but there were just 2 routes. I believe it was Juszczyk and Kittle, but neither route really controlled Hamilton, Kyle Hamilton, the safety, to that side. So Hamilton could just sit there and essentially read Brock Purdy, and then Purdy came late to Samuel on the bender, basically right into Hamilton. So that was the bad mistake. That's exactly what Kyle was saying. That was a bad read and a bad mistake. They had no one to control Hamilton, so he was just sitting there. The others were all, I like the use of the word unfortunate. The second one, which was Humphrey, I believe, on the Stevens tip, was actually a great play by Purdy because it was a called running play, and he saw the corner cat, and he knew that he was not going to hand the ball to McCaffrey right into the teeth of the corner cat by Stevens, so he knew exactly what to do, and he was throwing the quick screen out to Samuel, and there was a safety 10 yards away. That could have been a play where if Samuel catches that ball, and makes Williams miss, that could have been a touchdown for the Niners. But Stevens made a great play, and tip balls then become fluky. It could have been incomplete just as much as it was an interception. Then the third one was the one where he ran around. You could argue that maybe he shouldn't have done that, but we've also seen him make plays when he runs around. Now, if he saw the penalty flag, maybe he kind of knew that, and I don't know this, only he could tell you that. Maybe he knew that it was a holding, and he just figured, hey, I'm going to run around and try to make a play. Well, who knows? And then the last one, his arm got hit. So, the last 3 were kind of strange and fluky and weird, whereas the first one was absolutely just a really bad read and a bad throw by Brock.
After the game, one of the Ravens defensive players said that very matter-of-factly, he said when asked to explain their success against the Niners pass game, he said, well, Purdy's a spot thrower, and we just have to know the spots and get to the spots. Maybe that's part of the first one. I do wonder on the second one, as freaky as it is when you get a tip ball, Stevens seemed very comfortable. He came to a stop. He didn't rush Brock. He saw exactly what was happening in front of him and made a really good play on the ball. What do you think of that comment by the Ravens defense? He's a spot thrower, and we just have to get to the spots. What does it mean to you, and is it a weakness?
No, because everybody knows that. I mean, that's not news. That's what the Niners' pass game is. That's one of the reasons why Purdy is Purdy, because he's an anticipation thrower. He's as good as there is in the league at being able to do that. That's not a new theory that the Ravens have come up with. Everybody knows that. I thought once the game started to get a little out of hand, I thought they had a pretty good feel for how to play them, and that's where I also agree with Kyle. I think that that Purdy became a little uncomfortable after all this happened, but the idea that they knew about the spots, that's what their pass game is. So that was not something that only they know. Everybody tries when they play the 49ers based on understanding their formations, based on where the splits. They try to have a sense, tendency-wise, of what the routes are going to be, and you try to get into those lanes and into those windows and get to those spots. So, they also had a lot of good plays. I mean, they had 230 yards of offense in the first half, and that included 3 turnovers. They were essentially marching right up and down the field. And again, they had the 3 turnovers, and who knows what would have happened if those didn't occur. They did occur, but they really had no trouble moving the ball in the first half.
So you don't view that as a weakness or a flaw? It's just part of the offense that it's chess, and somebody's going to win one of the plays and somebody's going to lose one of those plays?
Yeah, I mean, you could say that about any offense has routes that everybody has tendencies and routes. That's like saying a flaw in the Dolphins defense is that they hit Tyreek Hill on in-breaking routes. I mean, that's what they do. Everybody in the league knows that. Some teams defend it better than others. It doesn't mean that it's a flaw. That's what their game is. I would say, and I think you'd probably agree, that the Niners have done it pretty well, don't you think?
Oh, there's no question.
Yeah,
but the Ravens were talking as if, and you're saying they've figured.
They're talking in generalities that this is how you have to play against the Niners. Based on what you just told me, and I didn't hear the comment, but based on what you told me, it sounds to me like what they're basically saying, hey, when you play the Niners, you've got to get to the spots, because that's the way you play them, because that's the way their pass game functions, is the ball's thrown to spots. I mean, I can show you numerous plays this year where Purdy released the ball before the receiver even began his break, and if I showed you those plays, if you were sitting in my office and as Purdy started to separate his hands, I said to you, who's he throwing it to? You wouldn't know, because he's such a great anticipation thrower, because he throws to spots. So I think he was just making a general comment about what the 49ers pass game is.
Greg Cosell joining us here on KNBR, the sports leader. I want to ask you about, we were talking about the third interception, the interception with the penalties on the field, and you referenced, Brock would know, only Brock would know. He did say after the game, basically based on the body language of the offensive lineman as he was going through scrambling, trying to make something out of nothing, he could tell that the penalties were probably against them, and so
right.
and that so in that instance, like, with everything going on, is it just as simple as you got to live to fight another play in that situation, or is it reasonable to expect a quarterback to know basically that the penalties are on them and you got to just go down or throw it away or do whatever?
I guess, and it's not you guys. I mean, sure, a lot of people are talking this. I think we're over-parsing this. The guy started 20 games in his NFL career. He's basically been phenomenal in almost all of them. And we're parsing a couple of plays as if we're trying to decide that this is somehow a flaw in his game. I think we're kind of overdoing this. I think it was just one of those games, the ball got tipped up in the air, what if the ball hit the ground? Would you have asked me this question? And again, this is no knock on you guys, but would you have asked me the question if that ball, when it got tipped, landed on the ground?
Well, no, I mean...
No, you wouldn't have, because there wouldn't have been a turnover. So I think we're parsing this a little too much. The guy's been phenomenal in almost every game that he's played.
Without a doubt, Greg. I think the question, though, is he has had a tendency, and Kyle Shanahan has referenced this, as great as he has been, he has had a tendency to look to basically play a little bit of hero ball in some instances like that, which have led to touchdowns on a couple of occasions where Kyle Shanahan has said, hey, that was a bad decision. I don't want him doing that. So I do think it's something.
And you're right. I remember he threw a touchdown to Ayuk. Yeah, I remember he threw a touchdown to Ayuk earlier, maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago. That was actually a poor decision, and it ended up being a touchdown. But I don't think. I think that Kyle's right, and that's a coach wanting his quarterback to play to perfection on every single snap. I think in the overall body of work, there have not been. The sample size of those kinds of plays has not been anywhere near large enough where you'd say that's a problem. He's also made a number of plays outside of structure that many view as a real positive in their offense because, Jimmy Garoppolo, let's say, couldn't do that. So a lot of people are excited about the fact that he does have the ability to make plays off script and outside of structure. Whenever a quarterback tries to do that, there's always a balance. Sometimes those plays work and it's great and we all get excited, and every once in a while they don't work because there's a random nature to those plays. But I don't think that's a flaw in his game. I think that's an experience thing. I think that the more you play, ideally, and my sense is Purdy's a pretty sharp guy. I don't know Brock Purdy, but my sense is he's a pretty sharp guy. My guess is, over time, you gain the experience to understand what the balance is. When can I make those plays and when can I not? I also think we lose sight of the fact that he started, 20 games in his NFL career? So he hasn't played. He hasn't played a lot of football, and he's played at a really, really high level. So people, I think, expect him to play at an incredibly high level on every single snap, and that's not realistically possible.
Did you feel like it felt to me, and I felt this way when he played Minnesota earlier this year? He had a couple of picks, but I thought he played really well outside of it. And I actually, and despite perhaps the line of questioning to this point, Greg, I felt that way this week too. Sometimes a guy throws 4 picks, and you can, if you were to filter out those throws, the rest of the game looks bad. And I didn't think that's what happened here, right? He had 11 completions of 10 air yards or more. It was actually more than any other game he's had this year.
I thought I would agree with you. I mean, that's why I made the point that they were moving the ball up and down the field. I mean, obviously the interception to Hamilton was bad, but that was on a drive where they just marched up and down the field. He hit, the kinds of throws that he normally makes. I actually thought it was after the the fourth interception, which was on, I believe, the second possession in the third quarter, that he started to play uncomfortably. But at that point, the game had kind of snowballed, and there was a whole different feel to the game. They had taken Williams out. They were playing a little makeshift. At one point, they put Burford at right tackle and moved McKivitz to left tackle because I guess Moore, I don't know whether Moore got hurt or they didn't think he was doing a good job. But, but at that point, the game kind of snowballed, and then I thought he was uncomfortable. But up until, in some ways, you could argue that the big drive was the first drive of the third quarter when they went 3 and out, because at that point they were down, 16-12, I believe it was. And if they had been able to march down the field and score there, even though it was just a field goal, we would have had a different game. But they didn't. They went 3 and out. And then on the very next series, of course, that's when Jackson had the 2 Jackson plays where he left the pocket and hit Edwards for 39 and then threw the touchdown to Aguilar when he left the pocket as well. And then the game seemed to take on a different feel. But in the first half, they essentially marched up and down the field.
Well, he also had big throws. And I mean, I'm with you. Like, it did feel like it got away from him, but they're halfway through the third quarter when he hits Debo in the hands on 3rd and 8 over the middle. And I don't know if Debo would have got the first down, but it would have given them a 4th and short near midfield. I
remember it. Yeah.
Then he hits Kittle. Greg, let me add this. The next drive, he hits Kittle on this layered throw over the linebacker for 17 yards. They end up getting down to the 25, and Ayuk brings it back. They end up on 4th and 11. He flips the ball over the shoulder to McCaffrey. So the other thing I'm trying to figure out is if he was rattled at times, he still stepped up and made some really good throws. If that was his mental
I agree.
space.
I mean, I didn't. I hope you guys didn't take it wrong. I wasn't trying to knock you guys, and I know that when you.
No, that's fine, Greg. I'm excited to parse everything with you. I guess that's part of the point.
This is I sit here and I watch tape of every single team in the league. Okay, and so I watch tape about 50 hours a week. So I see every single game, not every single one. That's not humanly possible in my life. I'm one guy, but I mean, I see a lot of football, and even when you talk about quote unquote quarterbacks having great games, there's always 3 or 4 plays a game where they're not. And if those plays don't turn out to be turnovers, no one even thinks about them. This was an odd game in that sense. So they turned out to be turnovers, and therefore we're trying to figure out. As I said, it's not just you guys. I see this on social media all the time. I mean, you guys see it all. There are people now saying, well, this just proves that Purdy's a fraud. I mean, these people know nothing about football, So, at the end of the day, can we parse each one of these plays and decide that he could have done something different? Sure. Just like coaches always say sometimes, I could have made a better call there. You can do that with any play. You can isolate one play in any game and decide it should have been done differently. There's a lot of plays in games. But I would say that, and I think you guys would agree, that overall Brock Purdy has been pretty freaking good as an NFL quarterback. And this is not an easy offense to play in. There's a lot of really hard throws. They work the middle of the field where there's a lot of bodies. His ability to throw with anticipation and precise ball location. You know how hard it is? I work with 2 guys on the matchup show who played quarterback. And you know how hard it is to throw a ball before a receiver even begins his break and actually put it right on his hands? That's really hard. He does that pretty consistently.
He has done it pretty consistently, Greg, and I think part of why we go through and parse it out in a sense is because we haven't seen a lot of – he's been so good. We haven't seen a lot of those mistakes, and I think because he's so new, we try to figure, is there something that maybe is a weakness compared to what are his weaknesses, basically, because he has shown so few of them. We're trying to find when he does make mistakes or when plays go against him, are those things that maybe are going to be the types of plays that he struggles with?
Let me ask you guys this.
Career.
Let me ask you this. So now, even if you want to use last game as a barometer, would you say that even with those plays in the last game, would you in your mind say, well, this now shows that maybe he's not a great decision maker? Would you say that?
No. I would not say that. No.
Neither would I.
No chance.
So, right, no chance. There's no chance that happened because he was a bad decision maker. I mean, the first interception, it was a bad. You know how many great quarterbacks make bad reads every once in a while? They all do. So I guess what I'm saying is what would be the negative just based on this game that you would come off of from this game? Are we now – I mean, he's been really precisely accurate. He's been a really good decision maker. He's made hard throws in an offense that demands hard throws. He's shown the ability to make off-script plays. What would this game indicate that would lead one to believe, not you guys, but lead one to believe that all of a sudden he doesn't have quality traits to play quarterback at a reasonably high level in the league?
Yeah, I wouldn't say anything would indicate that he doesn't have quality traits. I think the question and maybe trying to decipher it is, were the Ravens able to put him in more positions to where there were more opportunities for a mistake to lead to a turnover, if that makes sense. Basically, if you're so, I think that's. But
we're
that's
talking
not
about the
an
Super
indictment.
Bowl, JD.
Yeah, that's basically it's yes. And we spent a good portion of the show yesterday, Greg, talking about, hey, what if these teams play again? And I think you've laid out, I think, some reasons for optimism along those lines as far as the things that the Niners were able to do.
Let's turn it around and try to look at the glass half full as opposed to half empty. This was the best defense in the league, the team that leading the NFL in sacks, correct? The Ravens, okay? They're really good personnel, really good scheme. Mike McDonald does a terrific job scheming. They've got really good players. Kyle Hamilton is the best multi-dimensional player in the league on the back end. Okay, they had 230 yards of offense in the first half, which includes 3 turnovers. So you could look at it and say, well, okay, they were on pace for maybe 500-plus yards of offense against the best defense in the league. So you could, if you wanted to look at it that way, you could say, what's the problem?
There's no. I mean, the problem would just be that it didn't happen, right? But just to be clear, like we're not. I'm certainly not coming at it from an angle of did quote unquote headline did Brock get exposed? That's not what we're asking. I think that the heart of it is if there's a rematch in the Super Bowl, Greg, are there changes the 49ers need to make offensively, or was it more in your mind a fluky result based on more freak plays than really what the DNA of the game was? I think that's probably the heart of the question.
So let me turn it around as well. Are there changes the Ravens have to make so they can cover George Kittle?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, I think they can beat him.
You can look at this any number of different ways. So my guess is if they were to play again, as in any game where there's a rematch, and division games are like this too, there's always tweaks and adjustments that are made. 99% of the time we have no idea what they are because they're subtle as opposed to big, because teams are what they are at this point in the year. I mean, all of a sudden the Niners, for instance, are not going to have a brand new offense this week. Maybe they had a play or two or a couple of different formations, but the concepts are going to be the concepts. So would Kyle do some things differently in terms of maybe formations or motions? Or sure, of course he would. And Mike McDonald will do the same thing on the Ravens side. But I don't think you're going to see like a whole different defense or a whole different offense.
Greg Cosell, we appreciate it. Great stuff.
That was a good conversation. That was a great conversation.
I love
it. Because I see so much tape, the overreaction I always find fascinating. And not you guys, believe me. We just had a great conversation. But I mean, I just on Tuesday morning when I came in the office, I get in really early, and I'm starting to see all this stuff about Brock Purdy. It's like, what are people? Are people just stupid? I mean, come on. They're acting like all of a sudden Brock Purdy can't play.
No, I hear you, and I think some of the narratives are obviously off base there. I do think it's fascinating, though, and I think our view of it is to be able to speak with someone like yourself as to what really mattered and maybe what didn't is I think the beauty of being able to have the conversation we just did. So thank you for that.
I mean, I'm not trying to be sarcastic here, but because I watch tapes of pretty much every team. So I guess Patrick Mahomes can't play anymore either. I mean, you can take this to ridiculous extremes.
No doubt.
Oh, of course. I just think people were concerned. Did Mike McDonald have his number the way, Jim Schwartz has Kyle Shanahan's number? That
absolutely was not the case. And by the way, even that game, we'd be having a totally different conversation if Moody made that kick.
That's right.
And we'd be saying, man, Purdy was awesome down the stretch, driving right down the field for a game-winning drive. So, you have to look at the process and not just, the result makes it seem in that game like, oh, well, Purdy wasn't good and Schwartz had Shanahan's number. Now, maybe there is a factor there. We don't know that because we're not in the game plan meeting, so that's the kind of stuff we can't possibly know for sure. But if Moody makes that kick, which was not a ridiculously long kick, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be saying, hey, man, Purdy got the ball against a great defense. I think at the time they were the number one defense in the league, and say just march right down the field and set up a game-winning field goal. Man, this guy's great.
Thanks, Greg. We really appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. Loved it.
All right. Greg Cosell joining us here on The Sports Leader. We'll come back. We'll reconvene. I think a lot to get into off of what Greg had to say. And we will get into some Warriors conversation as well. Matt Maiocco in the 9 o'clock hour. It's John Dickinson, Guy Haberman, in for Murph and Marcus on The Sports Leader.
You guys see it all. There are people now saying, well, this just proves that Purdy's a fraud. I mean, these people know nothing about football.
Here's what's trending now.
Trending now.
On KNBR.com.
When asked about facing the Commanders, Kyle Shanahan said all teams are scary, and Jacoby Brissett has won a lot of games in this league, so Washington has just as good a chance to win as anybody against the 49ers. That story and more trending now on KNBR.com and the KNBR app.
KNBR and KNBR FM, your home of San Francisco 49ers football. This is KNBR, and this is Murph and Marcus on KNBR 104.5 and 680, the sports leader.
You know, I just, on Tuesday morning when I came in the office, I get in really early, and I'm starting to see all this stuff about Brock Purdy. It's like, what are people, you know, are people just stupid? I mean, come on. They're acting like all of a sudden Brock Purdy can't play.
Greg Cosell joining us here on The Sports Leader. It's John Dickinson, Guy Haberman. Hour number 2 of 4 today. Got a little bit of a late start, on from 7 until 11 as we get you up until the Pinstripe Bowl, Rutgers versus Miami here on The Sports Leader. Good conversation with Greg, Guy, to close out the first hour of the program. And look, I think Greg, in many ways, speaks for a lot of 49er fans, right? You get into the office on Tuesday, and you've got that coworker that's just can't wait to tell you that Brock Purdy stinks, and he wasn't having any of that. Don't you watch the film?
Yeah, I thought the biggest question coming out of that game, and you and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, and he answered the question there at the end of the last thing at the conversation, was basically, did Mike Macdonald figure something out on the Niners that should concern you in a rematch that Kyle can't get over on him? And he said, no, that's not what happened. Like, to me, that is the heart of this whole thing. And I think so much of the conversation about Brock, so much of the conversation about Shanahan, so much of the conversation about the 49ers, at the heart of it is a desperation to win the championship. That's what's at the heart of it, right? It's all of this anxiety about, can you keep this, how long can you keep this core together? How long is Ayuk coming back? So much, missed opportunities in terms of they were in the Super Bowl. They had another shot at all of that stuff. I think all of that is bundled up in that single game, because it feels like if that game had occurred against some random team, a team that you don't think you're going to see in the championship, not who cares, but I think so much of it is about, if that's the team, if you're going to get to the Super Bowl and you're going to play that team again, quote unquote, fans' perspective, please tell me we can beat them, right? I think that's where all of it comes from. And when you have somebody like Greg who does watch all the film, it is fun to parse. Like, I think it's fun to parse. And it's not about this one play means that this guy can't do all this other stuff, or this one other play invalidates all the good stuff he does. It's just a matter of, if it comes down to a 4-quarter game where you're going to get 25 throws, you're going to get like 10 possessions total. Who's going to have the advantage, Mike McDonald or Kyle Shanahan, right? Like that to me is the amount of pressure that they are under. Some of it external, no question, but I think some of it, like, they understand how good they are. They understand that rosters like this don't come along every day. They understand that quarterback performances like the one Brock Purdy's having don't come along every year. Even the best guys, right, can't duplicate it 10 years in a row for the most part. They understand the season that you've got from McCaffrey is incredible. Could he do it again next year? Maybe. But right now he's doing it, right? All of that stuff is how many more years is Trent Williams? All of that, I think, is tied up in these conversations about because here's the other thing. We've seen it. And our buddy John Middlecoff, for years we've talked about the Niners. He loves to say, Niners, like, you're not getting over on Niner fans because they've seen it. They know what a championship looks like, right? And so we've also in recent years seen how one play can be the difference between winning a championship and not winning a Super Bowl. And so I think all of that is tied up in all of this stuff. And then you get into, on a national level, people have opinions on Brock, and he's become a lightning rod for the league, for better or worse. And really, I think some of it's like, well, what's the worst? I mean, look at his production. Look how good he's been. Not relative to 20 starts, not relative to pick 262. Forget all of that. If you knew nothing about draft position or anything, you would say that's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL if you watched him. And so I think all of those things get tied up into these moments and into these plays. And I think the heart of what we all wanted to know coming out of Monday night do the Ravens have something? Can they do something? Did they do on defense that other people can't or won't or didn't or whatever? And he said no.
It comes down to if the 49ers don't win the Super Bowl, what is it going to look like if they don't? And I think if they're relatively healthy, now they weren't by the end of the game, but I think Monday night is sort of the way that the 49ers, if they're going to lose, how it's going to look, regardless of intent or mistake or, whether a couple of plays were fluky that turned into turnovers with maybe one bad decision mixed in there that was a turnover. Like, if you don't win it, it's probably going to look similar to the games that the 49ers haven't won this season. And I think you can go back through all of their losses, really. Maybe you throw out the Cincinnati game just based on the fact that they were clearly gassed coming off of the other two in Minnesota, and that was another short week game for the 49ers, the Monday night loss into a quick turnaround against the Bengals, although that was a Sunday afternoon game at home. But if the Niners don't win it, what's it going to – they're either going to be banged up, like they were at the end of the Cleveland game and miss a field goal, something fluky happen, or somebody gets hurt and makes a bad play. Brock Purdy had the interception trying to come back against Minnesota. It's not an indictment on who Brock Purdy is as a quarterback or anything like that. It's just a matter of you look at the way that game played out and you start to think, hey, this team's going to go far in the playoffs, but what would it potentially look like if they don't win it? And I think that's where some of the cause for concern just about the team overall would come in, maybe even more specifically than just Brock Purdy's performance, Guy.
Yeah, I mean, look, yes, first of all, everything you just said. I also think, and you and I Greg watches 32 teams all the tape. You and I watch all these other games, but specifically watch the Niners back 2 or 3 times a week. And one thing I think he said that is 1,000% right, and I think most people understand this. I just want to add one word to what he said. He talked about Brock as an anticipatory thrower. And it's true. I mean, there are so many throws a week where you go, when he cocks his arm back, as Greg said, you don't know where the ball, you're like, where exactly is he throwing it? Go watch the touchdown he threw to the left, the pylon touchdown he threw to Debo against the Cardinals. That left front pylon, you remember that back shoulder throw he threw to Debo? He lets go of that ball. Debo's at like the 11-yard line when he threw that pass. And that's consistent. Like it's so many of these throws he's throwing to a spot that looks like an incompletion when he lets it go. And the one thing I wanted to add is I think it takes a lot of guts and courage and confidence to throw the ball the way he throws it. Greg said all the stuff about how good he is at it, but I think it takes we could ask a quarterback about it, but it looks to me like it takes an incredible amount of guts, an incredible amount of confidence and belief in the system and your teammates. And one thing I think about his 1.5, almost 2 years now of NFL football is, how did he get that level of confidence? How did he develop that level of chemistry with the guys he plays with that quickly? It looks like he throws the ball to spots that you'd have to take 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years to have confidence in, and he did it immediately. That's like a specific part of him that I think makes me scratch my head every week and just go, wow. Like nothing that he did so many wow things in this game the other day. He did a lot of wow things. Like I said, I said it 2 days in a row, 11 completions of 10 air yards or more than any other game. Like, even though things were going poorly, he still stepped up and made some really good throws. So this is not a reevaluation of Brock Purdy. It all comes back to the heart of the question, which is, will this team win the Super Bowl this year? Like, that's the heart of the whole thing. That's the heart of the whole thing.
And you laid it out. It comes down to the fact that this could be this team's last best chance. It's not to say that they don't have opportunities to win it in the future, but it's going to look different. I mean, there are financial constraints that this team may be forced to deal with, whether it's, what does Ayuk's money look like? Does that mean you can continue to keep Deebo Samuel around? Are you going to be able to keep Christian McCaffrey as healthy and productive as he's been these last couple of years? I mean, all of those things I think the 49ers are hoping they have the ability to do. But the reality is, and we know this from watching the league, it is a year-to-year proposition. And we've seen the 49ers themselves, Guy, have years where everything goes wrong. This has not been one of those years by any stretch. This has been one of those years where, they've dealt with a normal amount of this or that. But, I mean, they ended up without a quarterback last year. They've ended up going to their third-string quarterback in 2020 and having, they got kicked out of the freaking county in 2020. So they've had things happen that have prevented them from, on the more extreme end, on the negative end. So I think, they know what a year-to-year proposition this thing can look like and how much they need to maximize this opportunity if they can, with the 1 seed still right in front of them. And, the best team I think that they've had in the Kyle Shanahan era. So 808 KNBR is the number. Yeah, go ahead. Quick thought there.
I just want to add one quick thing, which is also they've done an excellent job of extending their of reopening their championship window, right? This is a a franchise that has figured out they know how to manage it. And if you've got a franchise quarterback, then your window's going to be open, right? So those are two. I don't think we're saying. I know we're not. I'm not saying this is it. Nobody's saying that. It just the question is, will you look back in 10 years and go, that was your best shot, right? Maybe. I don't know. This team's pretty damn good. So I picked them to win the Super Bowl.
I think they're still the favorite to win the Super Bowl. Although, again, if you wanted to say the Ravens have put themselves in that position based on what they just did to the Niners, I think that's fair. We'll see what happens, though, when those two teams meet again, if they wind up meeting again on February 11th. All right, 808 KNBR, it's John Dickinson and Guy Haberman in here on a Thursday for Murph and Marcus. We're with you until 11 today. Pinstripe Bowl coming up here on the sports leader, Matt Maiocco, in the 9 o'clock hour. And we'll get into some Warriors conversation as well. Jonathan Kuminga had some comments about his role. He's been playing great of late. Warriors are back at it tonight against the Heat. We'll get into some Dubs talk. Coming up, it's KNBR 104.5 and 680, the sports leader.
Menlo Park, shout out to you for supporting KNBR. Menlo Park's sports leader.
What's trending now?
Trending now.
On KNBR.com.
Steve Kerr spoke at practice yesterday and said he's thrilled with Jonathan Kuminga's development, and he's a very talented player, but there still is a lot that goes into winning. That story and more trending now on KNBR.com and the KNBR app.
And now, time for the Protect Your Assets with David Hollander Business and Technology Report. Listen to the sports leader anywhere, anytime. Download the KNBR app. Murph and Marcus continue live from the KNBR Casino Matrix Studio. Casino Matrix Progressive Jackpots are here. Where are you? Just drop in. Please play responsibly. 1-800-GAMBLER.
All right, welcome back. John Dickinson, Guy Haberman, in for Murph and Marcus here on the Sports Leader. 808 KNBR is the number. We do have some phone calls, Guy. Let's get to a couple, and then we'll get into the Warriors conversation and everything centering around Jonathan Kuminga. And the Warriors in a little bit of a pickle, although they're playing much better basketball. They've won 5 of the last 6. But 808 KNBR is the number. Let's get to Leland, who joins us from Sacramento here on the Sports Leader. Hey, Leland.
Hey, good morning. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Leland.
Hey, thank you. Couple observations I have, coming off, the game. Is Brock Purdy, one of the things that he says about his 49ers, our guys run such precise routes. I've heard that, many times during the press conferences. And everybody says that Brock is an anticipatory thrower, that he anticipates and throws the ball before the receiver breaks. I'm wondering, are defenses figuring out, predicting where that point is, and are they anticipating his anticipation, if that makes any sense, and getting themselves in position to make a play on the ball like Kyle Hamilton did in the end zone? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Leland. I agree with that. I think teams are trying to do that. I think to varying degrees of success, Guy. I mean, I think the Ravens had more success at making life a little bit more difficult. They put themselves in position to create more turnovers. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to create those turnovers, but you give yourself a chance, and I do think the Ravens believed, while they still could have been burned by it if a couple of those plays go a different way, in particular the interception that was tipped into the air on the check when Greg Cosell, who broke down that Purdy had checked out of a run to get to that short pass to the left there that got tipped. So I think, yeah, teams are trying to do that, but good luck. You got to have, I think, the talent level that the Ravens do to have a chance at having success with it.
I mean, you look, JD, at the interception to Hamilton, and Greg mentioned it, but it was, part of the question is like, what was the play one that was going to force Hamilton to believe Brock's eyes when Brock tried to look him off the middle of the field? And it was Juszczyk running shallow, like 2 yards over the middle of the field, and it was Kittle running an out at the 10-yard line. Well, Hamilton's on the goal line. So, the part of it is, and this was part of the question for Greg, I think, is like, would Hamilton have believed Brock's eyes in week 1 and doesn't believe his eyes in late December? I don't know. Is it as simple as, you could also argue this, that Brock is such an excellent anticipatory thrower, that throw was actually not an anticipatory throw. Like, it was a departure from what normally makes him special, in that if you go back and look at that throw, because what did Greg say? And he's right. Like, you go watch all these plays that Brock makes, he is releasing the ball very early, and that's a compliment to him. It's what makes the sport, I think, the position so hard. Is like, you got to throw it before you see it, almost to a degree. Well, if you go look at that throw, Debo is open at the 4-yard line when he lets it go. By the standard of what he does, that's too. I mean, he said it's too late, so it's not probably too late. It is too late. So you could argue it wasn't the play design, it wasn't the throw, it wasn't Kyle Hamilton, it was just the timing. You could argue that if we're saying, hey, the fact that he anticipates everything is why he's so good, and that one felt like he waited. It was open, and that's when he threw it, and that's just going to be too late for him. It could be that simple. That if he throws that ball on time, it doesn't matter what Kyle Hamilton's doing. He wouldn't have been there. Debo's open. Nobody within 5 yards of him, either side. Touchdown. Could be that simple.
Right. Regardless of what
regardless of whether they know he's a spot thrower or not. Exactly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just think it comes back to teams are trying to do what they can to put themselves in position to where they can try to create turnovers, because for the most part, I mean, nothing has worked, right? You got to have elite talent to even give yourself a chance to make some of these plays, and the Ravens have that elite talent on the defensive side. And still, we could look at this thing like a couple of those plays could have gone differently, and maybe the 49ers, while they certainly didn't play their A game, would have been right there in position in the fourth quarter to win the game, basically, with a drive or two. Hell, they were almost in that position anyway. But, again, it just comes down to what teams have the potential to pose the most problems. Let's go to Kareem and Vallejo next year on The Sports Leader. Hey, Kareem.
Hey, good morning, fellas. Thanks for taking the call, and a Happy New Year to you guys and you guys' family. So, listen, here's the thing. I think what this game boiled down to is who was going to make the least mistakes. Now, prior to this game, that Sunday night game that Baltimore played against Jacksonville, Lamar threw a bad interception. Going back to this game Monday night, these teams were evenly matched. The talented on both defenses is second to none, 1 and 2 as far as scoring. So, with Brock throwing the 4 interceptions, it was still, right there for the taking prior to the half. Now, when Jackson was able to get loose and get down for that 30-yard scramble and put Tucker in position to make that field goal, now the game is 16-12 instead of 13-12. And as Greg alluded to it when you guys were on with him earlier, had the Niners not had a 3-and-out in that first possession of the third quarter, the game could have had a different outlook. So I just think that, people are making it more than what it is. Greg touched on it. Purdy has been playing unbelievable, only playing 20 games this year, and I don't think it's a problem moving forward. My main concern with this team is the health. Are we going to be able to get Trey Williams back healthy enough? Armstead has been on the shelf for the last month and a half or, a couple games. So we got to get healthy. We definitely got to get the first round bye, but moving forward, this team still have all the potential to win the Super Bowl, and they probably will meet this Raven team again in the Super Bowl if they end up with the number 1 seed. And minus the turnovers and the fluky turnovers that they had, this team is going to be able to beat that Ravens team, man. Thanks for the time. Talk to you guys soon.
Yeah, appreciate the call. I mean, good stuff there from Kareem and Vallejo. I mean, yeah, I think we all agree on that. If these two teams play again, of course the 49ers can win that game. I guess my thing is maybe the Ravens are the team among the AFC teams that would present the most challenges toward the 49ers' ability to do that. And it's not just the Ravens' defense, by the way, that make me feel that way. I know we've spent a good chunk of this thing, Guy, talking about the Ravens defense and talking about Brock Purdy, but part of my concern as far as that matchup would be the Ravens offense and the ability for Lamar Jackson to neutralize some of what makes the 49ers defense special. Now, look, they got to be healthier on defense, I think, to be able to win a Super Bowl, unless they're just going to be going out there and scoring 42 points in the Super Bowl, which I guess is plausible. But as far as what Kareem had to say there, Guy, I do think the health is the one thing that overarching everybody kind of worries about if you're a Niner fan, because you've seen that wreck so many different opportunities for this team to win a championship.
Yeah. I also think the thing with the Ravens is just they're in the small group of teams who, if the Niners play their A game, but the Ravens also play their A game, the Ravens could win, right? Most teams in the league just don't have a shot against the Niners if the Niners play their A game. Don't have a shot. Like, most of the league doesn't have a chance. There's a couple of teams with physicality, an athletic quarterback, a guy who can create at quarterback, that their A game, you got a game. Like, if I told you in the Super Bowl both teams bring their A game, you'd go, okay, well, then that's just a coin flip. If I told you go through the Niners, the Commanders bring their A game, not a coin flip. The Rams bring their A game, but the Niners bring their A game. Niners win the game, right? Cowboys bring their A game. Niners bring their A game. 49ers win. Like, it's just most of the league can't beat the Niners with their A game if the 49ers play their A game. The Ravens are in the small category of teams because of some of their talent and their style of play that I think their A game gives them a shot. They won. But it wasn't the 49ers A game. But I think even with the Niners, if you told me right now there's going to be a rematch, who you picking? I would pick the 49ers. I would. Because I just watched the game. They threw 4 picks and still halfway through the third quarter were in it. Actually, into the early fourth quarter had a shot. Now, I do think I will say this too, JD, it's different to rewatch the game 3 days later when you kind of remove the humanity of what it feels like to be down 33-12, right? Like, you can't remove that part of it. Does Debo drop that ball on 3rd and 8 with 9 minutes left in the third quarter down 30-12 because of the emotion of the game? Maybe. I don't know. But that's the thing. That is the takeaway with Baltimore. It's just that their A game has a shot to beat the Niners A game. But we didn't see the Niners A game, so we don't know what that looks like yet. Hopefully we get another chance at it. Dwayne Kuiper came on yesterday, says he wants the rematch. I'd say bring on the bring on some terrible team and guaranteed a Super Bowl. But
there aren't a lot of great options really in the AFC. I mean, would you feel great about a Ravens? I mean, sure, if that winds up being how it goes. I think there are plenty of reasons why you could think that the Niners will play better against the Ravens a second time. I think there are plenty of reasons to think they could beat Buffalo or Kansas City. But there really aren't a lot of great options as far as the AFC goes, as far as, hey, you want that team. Like, what if the Niners ended up playing Cleveland in the Super Bowl? I think they'd like that matchup based on the fact that the Browns don't really have a quarterback right now.
Yeah.
But defensively, you'd still have the Schwartz versus Shanahan component to all of that. So, look, I think health is probably first and foremost the biggest thing. If you're telling me the Niners are going to be healthier than they were, clean up some of the mistakes that they had, I would still consider them in a matchup against the Ravens to be the favorite. Now, I would bet that they will not be if they wind up matching up against each other. I would bet you that game is a pick-em and or a slight Ravens lean, just based on the fact that what we just saw. But that's something, coming up for basically 6 weeks down the line, assuming that the Niners can handle their business over the next couple of weeks in Washington and against the Rams. 808-KNBR is the number, 808-KNBR to give us a call or shoot us a text. More phone calls coming up, as well as the Warriors conversation. It's John Dickinson and Guy Haberman in for Murph and Marcus here on a Thursday on the Sports Leader.
This is The Big Hit.
Sponsored by Benjamin Moore Paints. Experience the Benjamin Moore retail difference at their independently owned, authorized retailers today or at benjaminmoore.com.
On KNBR 104.5 FM and 680 AM, the sports leader.
All shovels, Thompson. Again, short. Pachimski snares it away and lays it in.
Give my guy, put this kid on the all-rookie team right now. Look, I understand this is, we got the Wembanyama. I understand we got the Chet Holmgren, but make sure that we're talking about this young fella as an all-rookie.
Was shaking free. Instead, it's Wiggins sizing up Murray. Wiggins pushes it in. Andrew Wiggins going to work, and the Warriors jump back in front.
They're going to continue to attack that matchup with Murray on Wiggins with 4 fouls.
Murray trying to come back to the basketball. Will fire a bomb and hit it. Because, of course, all the way from fail, and it's a 4-point game.
And a lot of teams can't match the Rangers there.
Murray trying to get into a 3. Lobs it up left-handed. Got it on the rim. Nothing more. And that will do it. The Denver Nuggets outlast the Warriors on Christmas Day. 120-114 the final. Yeah, the Warriors saw their 5-game winning streak come to an end in Denver. Been off since Monday. Kind of strange. Some different gaps in the schedule. We welcome you back. It's John Dickinson, Guy Haberman in for Murph and Marcus on the Sports Leader here on a Thursday. 808 KNBR is the number. And the Warriors with the first of 7 on the Chase Center hardwood beginning tonight with the Miami Heat in town, Dallas on Saturday. It's going to be kind of a fun homestand for the Warriors. Orlando, then Denver, the Pelicans at the back end of that. You've got Detroit and Toronto mixed in as well as the Warriors try and separate from 500 after dipping 4 games under. Jonathan Kuminga in the headlines, Guy. Jonathan Kuminga always, I think, in the headlines surrounding what's going on with the Golden State Warriors. Let's get into this conversation a little bit here. Kuminga has been starting, and going back to the Draymond Green suspension and everything that happened in Phoenix a couple of weeks ago. And so you look at Jonathan Kuminga, who has been in the starting lineup, and the Warriors have played well with Jonathan Kuminga in the starting lineup, 5-2 in the 7 games that he's been the starter. And so you look at it, and he's been playing well, finishing most games. He didn't finish against the Nuggets. And then he had some things to say, Guy, about just his role with this Warriors team to Marcus Thompson of The Athletic, who was on hand in Denver. Nobody's guarding me. Me without the ball. Nobody's guarding me. Kuminga went on in his playing time. I've got to take that away and make sure my OGs get the ball. That's where it's confusing, Kuminga went on to say to Marcus Thompson. Sometimes I come out of the game not knowing what I did, and that messes with my head. It's like, what do they want me to do? I can pass. I can do different bleep. So, yeah, Kuminga went on to say he's a difference maker. We can get into the specifics of the rest of the quote here coming up on the Sports Leader. I know I'm a difference maker, but it's not up to me certain things. How can I say it? It's not up to me to control my minutes. I feel like I've done that, but the last voice ain't mine, and it's not easy because I know how to score the basketball. I know how to pass. I know how to do different things on the floor, but it's about putting all that together with the people we have on the floor. It's just tough to put it all together. I'm trying to figure out how to manage that. So, yeah, that was via The Athletic and the great Marcus Thompson, who we are efforting to come on this program at some point, possibly later in the morning, if not today, possibly tomorrow. I know he's going to be on hosting tomorrow here on KNBR, the Sports Leader. So, Jonathan Kuminga is always a lightning rod, a hot topic of conversation surrounding the Warriors. I think his upside, his athleticism, his flat-out ability, Guy, to really impact the game in different ways as the other players that the Warriors have in their roster, including the championship core guys. But he wasn't out there at the end of the game against the Nuggets, and it's led to this conversation about who's guaranteed to be in the finishing lineup, who's not. Steve Kerr having a bunch of different options that he has to sort through on a night-in, night-out basis. And then the question of, can Jonathan Kuminga and Andrew Wiggins play together? Because a big part of why Kuminga wasn't on the floor in Denver on Monday afternoon was the fact that Andrew Wiggins had returned, and not only had returned, but was the best player on the court for the Warriors. So a lot, as we parse through things here on a Thursday, a lot to get into as it relates to Jonathan Kuminga.
It's funny, too, that it happens. Brandon Pajemski had that tweet that everybody saw, and they actually put it up during the game on Monday. His tweet was basically like, I'm happy to be here. Right? Because he said 2 years ago I had 17 DNPs, played garbage time. A year ago I wasn't on draft boards. Now I'm starting for the best franchise in the NBA. Thrilled to be here. It's unusual for them. I mean, I was trying to think about in the quote unquote early days of Steph, Clay, and Draymond. Did one of them ever say anything like that? I guess Steph was such a high usage guy the whole time. I guess they weren't in this position because they were never on a team this deep early, right? When they were young.
Remember. Just real quick, just remembering back, I mean, Steph had the ankle issues, so there was some question like, hey, can this guy be healthy enough? Is he a true point guard? I mean, those were the things that the streets were saying about Steph Curry before he ultimately turned into a Hall of Famer and a unanimous MVP and all of that. The only thing I remember Clay saying was, and this was after they'd won titles, was that he wasn't sacrificing bleep with the addition of Kevin Durant. Like, hey, I'm still taking my shots. Yeah, I'm not sacrificing bleep. So the answer is no, to be honest. And then Draymond was a bench player until he basically played David Lee off the floor when David Lee was hurt in that first championship season, and Draymond asserted himself as the starter for the next decade with the way that he played defensively and with Steph Curry. So the short answer is no, but it's funny to try and think back at just how those three developed into what they came to be.
So they got a lot going on. They got Draymond back when?
January 7th-ish or 10th. I mean, possibly toward the end of the homestand or slightly thereafter, it has been reported.
They've got the on-court, just the lineup stuff, trying to figure out. I thought, one thing Marcus did in that article was basically break down, here's when the Nuggets subbed with a clear idea of who their finishing five would be, and here's how the Warriors tried to manage the last late minutes of a crunch time game. And, thinking partly like, is their record in these clutch games, the fact they've played so many of them, is it good or is it bad? Does it mean they're close or does it mean they can't win close? And reading Marcus's article, you're inclined to think, well, there's a flaw in these games. There's a flaw that exposes itself maybe a little bit in these close games. So you're managing that, and then the question becomes, does a guy who, for all the excitement about the potential in that locker room, you got guys going, well, hold on, let's count rings here. And I'm not saying anything. Why are you saying something? Is that a problem for them? Or maybe it's not a problem. Maybe they all agree. Like, yeah, we need him to win a championship, and that's all that matters. We've managed much tougher things before. They have. They've won championships. They've competed for titles, managing much tougher situations than, at the end of the day, like, pretty tame stuff as it relates to things players can say about their playing time. But nonetheless, it is a window into a frustration, right? And that kind of stuff can have an effect beyond just, even if everything else is figured out, if you have your room in order, so to speak, when it comes to the lineup, and they don't. What do you think? You go in there?
Well, what it boils down to is they have a couple, and I think really three, although a couple right now because Draymond is out due to the suspension. They have a couple of players that they know and who are going to be a part of their finishing lineup basically every night. And it's Steph Curry and it's Klay Thompson. Now, when Draymond Green is healthy and off suspension and back with this team, he becomes a third. The problem, though, then becomes, and this is where things get hung up for Kuminga and get hung up for others, is that there's only two spots at that point to finish a game. as far as other players that can be on the floor. And what happened on Monday was, Kevon Looney was going to be on the floor because he was going up against Jokic and Draymond wasn't there. So Kevon Looney took the third. And we can debate if you want, and I know a lot of Warrior fans will, well, they want to see Trayce Jackson-Davis and the athleticism and give him a shot against Jokic. That's fine. I think that's an independent and separate conversation we don't have to have. Whether it's Looney or Trayce Jackson-Davis, that spot, or Draymond Green, when he's available, that spot is accounted for as the third closing spot, at least in a game against Denver. So the issue becomes you have two spots. But what makes it more problematic for the Warriors is there are as many as 6 different players that I think you could put in a category on a given night that could lay claim based on how they are playing to earn those 2 spots as far as the closing minutes or even bulk minutes, regardless of how Steve Kerr orders the rotation. And so, let's just use Monday as an example. You've got Looney or Trayce Jackson-Davis, in this case Looney, out there with Steph and Clay. Andrew Wiggins on Monday was the best player on the floor for the Warriors. He was a game high plus 18, best on the floor for the Warriors. He scored 22 points, got to the free throw line 6 times. Like, that was the Andrew Wiggins on Monday that helped the Warriors win a championship 18 months ago. That he was that guy. So he's going to be on the floor. And then the question becomes, who is the fifth? And on Monday specifically, it was a debate between Jonathan Kuminga, who played a pretty good start to the second half after not really being all that effective in the first half, Chris Paul, who Steve Kerr loves having on the court at the end of games with Steph and Clay to help organize the offense and the leadership. And I think they believe they got Chris Paul because Chris Paul helps you win close games down the stretch, because that's what he's done, at least in the regular season, throughout the entirety of his career. His teams do well down the stretch in winning close games. And then it's Podziemski, who's been awesome in terms of energy and rebounding and being what Steve Kerr calls a connector to the Steph and Clays and the shooters, and he's a playmaker, basically. He's different than Chris Paul, but similar to Chris Paul in that he is a playmaker who brings a lot of energy, youthful exuberance to the court. So you're going to play one of those two guys and Wiggins, and that leaves Kuminga out. And it then leads down the path to something that Tim Kawakami wrote about, and we had sort of bookmarked to get into this discussion yesterday, and we talked a lot of Niners, and Kawakami wrote about it, and we'll play the cut from the question from Warriors practice yesterday coming up here. But it leads down the path of, can Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga play together, and is that something that would have been beneficial to the Warriors on Monday, which I think was the crux of what Marcus was getting at in the piece that he wrote. So 808 KNBR is the number. 808 KNBR, it's John Dickinson, and it's Guy Haberman in for Murph and Marcus here on a Thursday. If you want to get into the Dubs conversation, either via text or on the phone lines, 808 KNBR is the number. We'll have the sound for you next, and we'll just get into how deep an issue is this really for the Warriors, because Draymond's coming back, Gary Payton's coming back, the trade deadline is coming up rapidly. Trade deadline sooner than people think. It's actually before the Super Bowl, believe it or not. And so we'll discuss just sort of short-term and big picture this balance of youth versus veteran, which has plagued the Warriors really over the last year plus. It's all straight ahead here on the Sports Leader.
From the Chilton Auto Body Traffic Desk. Listen to the sports leader anywhere, anytime. Download the KNBR app. Murph and Marcus continue live from the KNBR Casino Matrix Studio. Casino Matrix Progressive Jackpots are here. Where are you? Just drop in. Please play responsibly. 1-800-GAMBLER.
Can you play Kuminga and Wiggins together more? Or is that just the equation? It doesn't work with those two on the floor together?
I think it's something we will try with maybe some new people around them. Their numbers are not good together, frankly. They're very redundant. So the tape and the numbers haven't been great. But we recognize, too, that we have a level that we need to get to really compete at the highest level. And if those two guys can coexist on the floor, it does give us an elevated athleticism and elevated potential. But we have to find the right combination of people around those two.
So there you have it. Steve Kerr yesterday, following Warriors practice. Warriors back at it tonight as they will take on the Miami Heat. But Tim Kawakami of The Athletic asking the right question, as he typically does, in the aftermath of Monday's game in Denver. And Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga, can they play together? It's John Dickinson, Guy Haberman here on The Sports Leader and for Murph and Marcus on a Thursday. Tim also dug into, Guy, the numbers as far as those two as a duo. It's a minus 21.4 net rating. That's for Kuminga and Wiggins on the floor together. I don't get the impression from that answer that Steve Kerr's really eager to start changing the rotation to try and fit everybody else around those two, especially when you know who two of the other players that you think would be on the floor together, at least at the end of the game with them, would be, and it's Steph and it's Klay Thompson, with potentially Draymond Green when he's back from suspension. So it sounds like it's basically coming down to, at least at this point, between Wiggins and Kuminga, who's playing better on that particular night, or in the case of Monday afternoon. And I don't think anybody could really argue with the fact that Wiggins, if you watch the game, was the better option on Monday.
Okay, so dumb question, JD. Why what is your theory? Why can't they play together? And then the follow-up question becomes, is it worth investing in? Because it sounds like he's saying, well, if we're going to do it, it's actually more about the three guys on the floor with them and trying to find the right three guys. I don't know if you would, you watch all this stuff and you're around Steve all the time. I don't know if you would interpret that as, it didn't sound like Steve was optimistic that they could figure that one out in the next few months, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Short answer is no. Short answer is no. I don't think it's worth. I don't think it's worth the effort to try and figure it out in the context of everything else that this team does well. I think, again, a lot of that boils down to, well, Steph and Clay are going to be out there specifically at the end of games with Draymond. So I think, if you're trying to find other combinations, you're basically saying you're going to do that in other parts of the game. Well, the Warriors bench, the way that they've divvied things up and split things up, has been, among the best, if not the best, in the NBA this year. So, and that's with different combinations of players coming off the bench. So those groupings have all worked in the way that they've tried to organize it. So I don't think you want to mess with that. And also, this starting lineup that Steve Kerr has deployed for these last 7 games has worked with Steph and Podziemski in the backcourt, Klay Thompson sliding up to the 3, Podziemski basically taking Wiggins' spot in the starting lineup with Klay Thompson moving to the 3. Kuminga has taken Draymond's spot, and then they've been starting Kevon Looney, who I think they're more comfortable sticking with Draymond Green out of the lineup for the time being. So the short answer that turned into a long-winded answer is no. I don't think Steve Kerr believes that there's that's a priority to try and figure out how Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga can play together.
It sounds like you don't think it can work.
No, and you asked me, well, why can't it work? And look, I mean, I think at times it can, but I think what happens is Kuminga is so aggressive at looking for his own shot that I think it makes Wiggins, who at times can be timid, even when he's being aggressive, he can kind of look timid, even when maybe he thinks he's being aggressive. I think he just gets, out aggressive, if that makes sense. I made up a word, but he just, I think Kuminga's going to look to get his, and Wiggins is just going to naturally float when he naturally floats anyway. I think the other part of it is when Wiggins is playing well, the Warriors would just prefer to have Wiggins out on the court over Kuminga, because when Wiggins is playing well, he's a complementary piece that helped them win a championship a year and a half ago. I mean, that was 2022. We're about to be in 2024 here in a few days, but this was still last year, 18 months ago, that Wiggins was helping the Warriors win a title. So I think they view the best version of Wiggins as just a better player that they know fits with the other Hall of Famers that he had been playing with Steph and Clay and Draymond. And so I think when you get that version of Wiggins, as the Warriors got on Monday, you want that on the floor as a complementary player to everybody else. So, and it's not a slight against Kuminga, who's been terrific these last couple of weeks. He really has. But there's a difference between being a productive, good player in a rotation. And I think we always, it seems like the fans always, and I think some in the media always want to make the next leap with Kuminga. And I think this is what Kuminga's getting at himself when he makes the comments that he did to Marcus Thompson. I think it comes from a good place, but it just felt out of place, the timing of it, to be perfectly honest. He had been finally proving himself to be a capable, consistent role player, and now all of a sudden it's like, well, I want to be more than that. And again, I don't think it's malicious, and we'll hear Steve Kerr's reaction to it from practice yesterday coming up here in just a second. But I do think there's a sense of the Warriors have tried to get Kuminga comfortable and effective as a role player on a contending team. Like, figure out a way to get that right. And I think these last 7 to 10 games, they feel like they've started to get that right. And now it's like, oh, you're unhappy with that. So, I think while Steve, and again, we'll play the cut, is thinking, I got to keep everything together and act like this isn't a big deal. And I think you're right. You said it. I mean, in the grand scheme of Warrior issues, this probably isn't the biggest Warrior issue. But I do think there had to be a semblance, Guy, of Steve Kerr internally kind of thinking, well, damn, man, like, come on, JK, like you're helping us right now. Don't act like you're disappointed by the fact that, with your role at this point, because you didn't finish one game when basically you'd been finishing 8 of the last 10 games or whatever the heck it is.
Do you think he has a point at all? Like, I know you don't like that he said it, but it also sounds like there are things that he does better than most other players on the team.
I think I don't think he has a point,
because he's got something that kind of
always be out
right?
there. He does, but I think it comes down to, I think where they get caught with Jonathan Kuminga, and I think where the issues has been he views himself as one kind of a player, and that kind of player is a player that they need. But I also think they want his game, like, he wants to explode. Jonathan Kuminga wants to get out there and cook. He wants to get out there and be, as he said, a difference maker. He wants to be a different. Nobody's guarding me. He wants to be a difference maker, like, and believes he is right now a difference maker. I can pass. I can do different blank. I know how to pass. I know how to do different things on the court, but it's about putting it all together with the people we have on the floor. It's just tough to put it all together. I'm trying to figure out how to manage it. He wants to cook. He doesn't want to be only a dunker and a guy that shoots around the basket and basically scores off of his own defense or off of every other action that the Warriors play on offense. I think that's what the Warriors want him to be. I think they want him to be energy defensively. I think they want him to rebound. I think they want him to fly around. I think they want him to get easy buckets without basically taking a lot of shots, hit the open corner three when it's presented to you. And I think he wants to cook. I think he views himself as somebody that wants to put it on the deck and hit pull-up jumpers like Kevin Durant or Kawhi Leonard. And maybe that's the player that eventually he becomes. But for the Warriors right now, it's not about that. It's about, can he be a consistent role player on a team that believes they can win a championship? And so I do think there are different agendas basically in play between what the Warriors want and what Kuminga believes he is, who he believes he is as a player. I want to get your take on that coming up. I want to let everybody know you're listening to KNBR AM and FM San Francisco, the sports leader, a Cumulus media station. It's John Dickinson and Guy Haberman here in for Murph and Marcus. I also want to play the cut from Steve Kerr post-practice yesterday, but just your general thoughts on all of that as it relates to Kuminga.
Well, it's going to get more complicated because Draymond's going to come back. So
and Gary Payton II.
And yeah, so to me it all and Kawakami wrote this. He started near the end of that article that you referenced getting into, do they have to make a trade? And and I think you mentioned this earlier, it's not even a 1-for-1 trade. Like, are you trying to trade 2 or 3 guys in a deal to try and sift your roster down? I mean, we spent so much time around this team the last few years looking for depth. Now they've got it, but not everybody wants to be a part of just being depth. And it seems like the other complicating factor is that we're not talking about a team who's like, the 4 seed right now in the West and just trying to figure out how they're going to win a championship. They're 500 with a winning streak. Like, they're trying to figure out how to make the play. I mean, how to avoid the play.
No, you're right.
Right? So there is a lot.
Yeah, they are out right now. Right now, they would not be a play-in team. They are 11th in the Western Conference right now, tied with Phoenix, right there with the Lakers and Rockets, pretty close to 8th, within, I guess, a half game of 8th. But right now, they would be on the outside looking in.
So is there a trade coming? That's the thing that you just wonder, is there a trade coming? And what is that trade? Because what Tim wrote was, could it be Wiggins?
And could it be Wiggins? And I think the question is, if it's Wiggins with Draymond coming back, I'm not sure that solves the problem, because that would be setting up Kuminga to be the 3, because Wiggins had been the start. Or are you going to play Draymond at 5 with Kuminga at 4, and then Podziemski becomes somebody that remains in the starting lineup? So I guess that's one way to look at it. But it's not apples to apples as far as Kuminga or Wiggins, as much as when they're on the floor together, you can say you can only have one or the other. Because when you have Draymond back into the fold, he's got to take a spot, and then somebody else has got to bump him up. Because that's been the other – I think Kuminga views himself more as a 3, but the Warriors have almost exclusively played him at the 4. They do not play him with 2 other bigs on the court ever. He is always one of the bigs, usually with Looney or with Trace Jackson-Davis or with Draymond Green. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the Warriors wind up handling all of this. The other part of this equation is, do they deem Kuminga so valuable as to what he can become as a player down the line, as he now finally has fit his game into the box to be productive as a role player, to where they view keeping him as a better option than moving on from him? Because I think you could read it the other way. I think you could read it as maybe the core veterans would look at it as, well, if Kuminga's unhappy and Wiggins is getting back to form, which he hasn't proven yet, then maybe Kuminga's the player that gets packaged with other young players to bring back a veteran player. But then that almost sends you down a different path, because the younger players have been a big part of the reason the Warriors have turned it around over these last 7 games. So it would be unfair to throw them away to basically go more veteran or more young veteran. But then the issue that complicates it is, who does Steph Curry trust? Who does Steph Curry want to play with? And I think that's something that at times is under-discussed. Steve Kerr ends up taking the blame, but a lot of the times it becomes about, what Steph Curry wants. And what the veterans are the most comfortable with as the guys that have helped this franchise win so many titles. So 808 KNBR is the number. We do have a couple of people on the phone lines we want to get to here on The Sports Leader. And also I want to play this cut. So Steve Kerr did react, and we'll play this now, to what Jonathan Kuminga told Marcus Thompson following yesterday's practice. Here's what he said.
I'm thrilled with JK's development. I think what he's doing a better job of right now is just getting the ball out of his hands quickly when it comes to him. So it's a quick swing when we have an advantage. I've seen him get 5 or 6 assists over the last 3 games where he's caught it and immediately swung it to Steph or Clay for an open shot. And those plays early in the season he wasn't seeing. He was catching and holding, and our offense was getting stopped. And so plays like that he's starting to improve upon. There's still a lot that goes into winning. I don't mind those comments at all. Every guy wants to play, and JK's a really talented guy. Every game I have to read the game. And Wiggs was our best player. He's playing, in that position. We've decided to go with Wiggs down the stretch, and those are easy decisions for me. So the game before, I think JK finished, and he was playing great, and it's just going to vary from game to game for everybody. And that's just where our team is right now, where JK is too.
So there you have it. I mean, it's going to vary for everybody. Everybody really not named Steph or Clay, and probably Draymond, although I do think Draymond may find himself in that conversation more than he ever has. The only caveat to that is what we were just talking about, which is just it's the fact that Steph wants Draymond out on the floor at the end of games as well. So just your takeaway from what Steve Kerr had to say there, Guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's saying things without saying things, right? He says we're reading it game to game. Did he say it's an easy decision, or it was an easy? Was he saying it's an easy decision every fourth quarter? We'll defer to Wiggins, or was he saying in that game it was an easy decision?
I think he meant in that game it was an easy decision because and to be honest, it was. Like, if you watch the game, like Wiggins, if the decision is Wiggins over Kuminga was an easy decision Monday. Wiggins was the best player on the floor for the Warriors Monday. So that was never, and Kuminga didn't really play well in the first half. He played well in the third quarter, but in the first half he was erratic and took a couple bad shots. His team defense was not sound. And so, I think those are some of the things that Steve Kerr's looking at as he's evaluating it game to game. But then Kerr also pointed out, Guy, that the game before Kuminga finished, and I want to say 7 of the last 10 Kuminga has finished the game, and Wiggins has been out for some of those, but he's earned the right. I guess where the issue is here, Guy, is that I think Kuminga believes he just should be out there hey, I've done it for the last 10 games. I've played well enough for the last 10 games to where I should kind of be a made dude now and just be out there. And I think what Steve Kerr's saying is, no, that's not how this thing works. It's not how it works for you, but it's also not how it works for Wiggins, and it may not be how it works for Draymond coming up soon, and it's not how it works for Chris Paul or Podziemski. And so therein lies, I think, the problem is that I think Kuminga's looking at this as, what do I got to do to be one of the guys? And Steve Kerr is saying, you're doing everything to be one of the guys. Just keep doing it and quit worrying about, where it lands your career, down the line or the ceiling and all that. But I think that's difficult for a young player that was drafted 7 overall, that's watched a lot of his peers that were picked around him get a ton more playing time, albeit on some losing teams.
I think it's challenging. Bad teams don't have role players. Bad teams are just constantly trying to figure things out. And this team is built to try and win a championship. That's the goal, right? All in every year for a championship in this particular year. And they need role players. But sometimes when you're 15-15, you don't feel like you're a good team if you're one of the role players. You feel like, if I could do more, we could be better. And I think that's probably a little bit of a rub for them, right? Because if you imagine you're not us, having seen this whole dynasty come together, having seen it all work. You're a guy who just came in, and you're looking around going, we need what I've got. Because we're a 500 team that's not in the playoffs right now. And what Steve Kerr is saying is, no, just trust me. Keep doing what you're doing. And eventually we'll get this thing molded in a way that we're not going to be a 500 team, and we're going to be in the playoffs, and we're going to be a championship contender. And that's the Bill, to borrow from the old Bill Parcells quote, like, this is why you lift all them damn weights. Like, this is part of the job, and it's not an easy part of it, is getting guys to understand, and in this case specifically Kuminga, to understand that what I want your role to be and how you can best help this team is different than what you want it to be right now, and it doesn't mean that it can't be something different for you in the future. And I just think it gets really challenging. If you were 24-6, nothing you can say. You can't say anything, right? You couldn't argue with whether it's working or not. But they're not 24-6. And so he's going, look, guys, and I think anybody who's ever been kind of the understudy would understand it. Just give me more rope than you think I've earned, and I'll prove to you. That's what Jonathan thinks. That's what anybody with confidence thinks. But the picture that they have is a much wider view of how they've gotten to this point. I don't know. It'll be one of the great. There's all these challenges. One is just the simple game management, but now it's revealed that the other big challenge this year for Steve Kerr, one of them will be getting Jonathan Kuminga in the right headspace to be what they need him to be for this particular team to compete for a championship.
I think you nailed it. We'll continue this conversation coming up. 808 KNBR is the number, but we also have Matt Maiocco, who's going to join us for his weekly. So we will get into some 49ers, and then we'll come back to this conversation because I think it's a good one. It's John Dickinson and Guy Haberman in for Murph and Marcus here on the Sports Leader. He wants to cook.
What's trending now?
Trending now.
On KNBR.com.
Yesterday at practice, Steve Kerr was asked if Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga can play together. Kerr responded by saying their numbers aren't great, and they can be redundant, but it could work with the right combination of other players around them. That story and more trending now on KNBR.com and the KNBR app.
Daly City, shout out to you for supporting KNBR, Daly City's sports leader.
And now, time for the Protect Your Assets with David Hollander Business and Technology Report. Faithful, Murph and Marcus keep rolling with NBC Sports Bay Area 49ers insider Matt Maiocco.
Sponsored by Golden State. Since 1954, when you succeed, they succeed. Visit them today at goldenstatelumber.com. And by Amici's East Coast Pizzeria. When you want the best pizza in town, Amici's delivers.
It's Murph, Marcus, and Maiocco on KNBR. Streaming live at twitch.tv/the sports leader.
All right, back to the UMA guest line. It's John Dickinson and Guy Haberman in for Murph and Marcus here on the Sports Leader. NBC Sports Bay Area 49ers insider Matt Maiocco joining us here. What's going on, Matty?
Just getting ready to take a red eye tomorrow night to Washington, D.C.
JD, you going to be on one of those too?
I will not be.
You will not be there?
I will not be. I will not. No, I will not. This is one of the two, both in my previous life and my current life, that were not booked as road games that I was going to be covering. But yeah, I was just going to ask you, where among the holidays in different places, and look, the Niners have covered all the holidays between Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, but you've obviously covered the team for a long time. What has maybe been your strangest holiday? Hey, I'm going here, or I spent this day there, or what? Like, you got to have some kind of interesting trip sequences that have happened.
I mean, one that comes to mind is 2011 Thanksgiving in Baltimore, which was totally a made-for-TV, feel-good, all the Harbaughs for Thanksgiving, except for Jim wasn't real thrilled about that one. He would just he didn't. Yeah, I mean, rightfully so. I mean, the 49ers kind of got hosed on that one, where cross-country flight on a short week to play the Ravens, and they got worked pretty good that game. I do remember. I think it was Christmas Eve. 49ers played in St. Louis. And so I was traveling early Christmas morning, and I remember going to the airport, like early flight out of St. Louis. I remember getting a call from my wife and thinking, holy cow, what time is it back home? And she was like, struggling. I guess Santa had left the dollhouse unassembled. So she was the one putting it together, and she was basically, MFing me as I was in a cab to the I'm joking, of course. She wouldn't have done that, never. But I do remember that one where, like, oh my gosh, I wish you were here because this is a disaster. So those are two that definitely come to mind.
Similar to what Kyle Shanahan said this week, right, about staying in the hotel, because the last thing you want is guys up till 3 a.m. building the dollhouse. And the next thing you know, you haven't slept before the game.
Yeah, and then, by the way, I'm not a real patient person, so I remember, like, bleary-eyed at probably like 5 a.m. St. Louis time, thinking, you know what, I think I'd rather be here right now, heading to the airport than back home putting together a dollhouse.
Yeah. Now, if that happens in 2023, you can just send the TaskRabbit over at 5 a.m. I'm sure they'll take time and a half to take care of that for Santa. Where are you at a few days removed from the Ravens game on that performance, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I think that, when you look at what happened in that game, I mean, I guess it's almost like you would think if the 49ers or, either way, if one of those teams in that game had a 5-0 turnover differential, you probably would think that the outcome would be even greater than 33-19. So, yeah, I mean, I think that some of the mistakes were obvious. Some of them were bad luck. But I think in the case of the Ravens, they made their own good luck. Like people can kind of slough it off and say, oh, the Ravens got lucky. The Ravens did not get lucky. Maybe the 49ers had some bad luck, but the Ravens certainly did not get lucky. Everything that they got as far as a takeaway, they earned. And I think that's the part where, probably coming into this or coming out of this game, I don't know that I think anything less of the 49ers, because I think that, in a lot of ways the ball did not bounce their way. But I do think I do have a much higher opinion of the Ravens coming out of that game because, like I said, yeah, the ball did bounce their way on some occasions, but they earned every bit of that. Like that, getting your hands up, getting the ball, your hands on the ball, hitting the quarterback as he's throwing. I mean, pretty much all of those mistakes, maybe except for the first one. But even that was a great defensive play by Kyle Hamilton as Purdy tried to look him off and tried to get him to move to his left. And he really didn't bite on that, on the eye movements and the look off. So everything that fell the Ravens' way in that game was a direct result of the Ravens doing it the right way. So I don't make a whole lot out of it other than the Ravens just simply outplayed the 49ers in almost every imaginable way. And by the way,
Matt,
if you hear the pounding in the background, we got some construction going on here at the house. It's not a dollhouse being assembled.
I was texting Guy actually as you were speaking. I said, Guy, do you have an aggressive DoorDasher that's trying to get in, or is Maiocco having a room added to his house? Was basically option number 2. So there we go. I think we have the answer.
Actually, a room being taken down, but a deck being added. How's that?
Oh, wonderful.
Ooh.
No, it's beautiful.
I'll have you guys over for a cocktail here soon. Hopefully soon.
Do it.
Absolutely. Can't wait for that. There's been a lot of discussion about the 49ers offense, and anytime you turn it over 5 times, Brock Purdy throws 4 interceptions, that's going to be a big part of the conversation. What did you make of what the Ravens did offensively? There were some short fields and some pretty positive situations they were put in to start, but what did you think of what they could do to the 49ers defensively that maybe traces for down the line if these two meet again?
Yeah, I don't know. It to me, it was kind of like the NFC Championship game where, the Eagles basically didn't have to do anything in the NFC Championship game, and all they had to do was kind of tread water and hold serve, and they were going to win that game. To a lesser degree, that's kind of the way I felt with the Ravens, where the offense was put in such advantageous situations, but the 49ers could not stop them. It was a 6th consecutive or 7th consecutive possessions where the Ravens scored, and some of those were short fields, some of them weren't. I don't know that we saw a whole lot. The 49ers, I thought, did a by and large, other than a 30-yard scramble, I thought they did a really good job in kind of keeping Lamar Jackson's legs from being a huge impact in that game. Other than, they kind of did a rush similar to what they did against the Eagles, which was just try to keep eyes on him at all time. The difference is Lamar Jackson does keep his eyes down the field, and he tries to make plays with his arm first. And I think he's changed a lot in that, the running aspect of it isn't, number 2 or even number 3 in the progression. Now he wants to throw the ball, and if all else fails, then he can rip off a 30-yard run. So I think that the defense needs to figure some things out as far as how they want to work the defensive backfield. The fact that they brought in Jason Verrett for a handful of snaps there at the beginning of the second half kind of is interesting, because I almost was of the opinion where, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Well, they certainly tried to fix something by just getting him out there and working him into the mix, and where this goes from here is kind of interesting to see, because their defense had played pretty well. Their pass defense has been very good. But maybe they see an opportunity to be even better for the games that matter. So we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but I know if they play again, I think it's going to be a really intriguing matchup because of the way that game developed on Monday. It would be a different looking game because the circumstances would be different. So I think it's kind of difficult to say. You could probably look at it and go, wow, the Ravens are a really tough matchup for the 49ers. I happen to think the Ravens are a tough matchup for anybody. But would the 49ers, again, this is very much down the road, but would the 49ers be able to, would that be a benefit to them having faced them once already? And I think it would, because the Ravens defense is so different than a lot of other teams, or most other teams, or all other teams in the NFL. And I think just having that experience of going up against them once and seeing their fronts and how their DBs play very sticky coverage on the back end, I think that would end up being quite beneficial to the 49ers.
Matt, how big of a deal is? I mean, we got a lot of injuries. We don't have time to talk about them all. The Jair Brown one seems like a headliner just because of what the potential drop off is to the next man up. How concerning is his situation?
Yeah, Coach Kyle Shanahan was kind of vague, but kind of ominous, right? The way he described it as a concern, and it's something that was not apparent after the game on Monday night, and it wasn't even known the next morning. So that was something that happened later on. He labeled it as a concern. I don't think he's playing this week. Whether it's something that drags on into the future remains to be seen. But I guess the good news for the 49ers is, they've made some moves here. They haven't stood pat. Yesterday was the first day that Sebastian Joseph Day, the defensive tackle, comes in, and that's could be a huge pickup because we don't know what Eric Armstead's status is for the rest of the season. But for them to go out and get Logan Ryan, a guy who started a lot of football, played a lot of football, he could step in almost immediately. They've been cross-training Isaiah Oliver at safety. And then they also have Eric Harris, who is on the practice squad. So they do have some options there. So they've kind of, really at all positions, they've kind of covered their butts a little bit, even an offensive line with some veteran guys. When the season started, they had their 5 offensive linemen that they figured would be their starters, and they've been their starters for most of the season. But they also had guys like John Feliciano and Matt Pryor, who played a lot of football, and Jalen Moore, who was at one point kind of pinpointed as being a starter for the team at offensive tackle. So, there clearly would be a drop off, but you go from a guy, Jair Brown, who is new to the NFL game and will be, susceptible to some rookie mistakes, to a guy who has a tremendous amount of experience in Logan Ryan, if indeed he is the guy. So I think the 49ers, like their mindset would be, Brown getting better. The more he sees, he has more of an upside, but maybe for the short term, it wouldn't be that much of a drop off going to a veteran guy, a guy who's won a Super Bowl, a guy who's been on some good teams. He's played a lot of meaningful football. Maybe it's not that big of a drop off just because of the intangible factor.
Matt, great stuff. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon. Enjoy that trip, and hey, tell those guys to pipe down on the deck. Come on.
Well, you know what? These guys, I tell you what, they come with the mentality of just keep pounding.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt.
And with that, I will bid you a fond farewell.
Are they Panthers fans?
Exactly.
Happy New Year, Matt. Take care.
Okay, Happy New Year, guys.
All right, Matt
Isn't that
Maiocco
the
joining
Panthers
us here.
thing?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I remember Stephen Curry when he came out at the
right.
Super Bowl at Levi's, and he was the guy that beat the drum.
That's right.
for the Panthers when the Cam Newton and Peyton Manning were going at it at Levi's back in 2016. Good stuff from Matt Maiocco. Not as he seemed a little more optimistic as the options behind Jair Brown.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. We'll also get back into the Warriors conversation surrounding Jonathan Kuminga. 808 KNBR. We're with you until 11 today. Expanded edition of Murph and Marcus. It's JD and Guy Haberman here on the Sports Leader.
If you hear the pounding in the background, we got some construction going on here at the house. Yeah, actually a room being taken down, but a deck being added. How's that? Yeah. I'll have you guys over for a cocktail here soon.
Listen to the sports leader anywhere, anytime. Download the KNBR app. Murph and Marcus continue live from the KNBR Casino Matrix Studio. Casino Matrix progressive jackpots are here. Where are you? Just drop in. Please play responsibly. 1-800-GAMBLER.
It's kind of difficult to say. I mean, you could probably look at it and go, wow, the Ravens are a really tough matchup for the 49ers. I happen to think the Ravens are a tough matchup for anybody. But would the 49ers, again, this is very much down the road, but would the 49ers be able to, would that be a benefit to them having faced them once already? And I think it would, because the Ravens defense is so different than a lot of other teams, or most other teams, or all other teams in the NFL. And I think just having that experience of going and up against them once and seeing their fronts and how their DBs play very sticky coverage on the back end, I think that would end up being quite beneficial to the 49ers.
All right, Matt Maiocco there, just joining us here on The Sports Leader. It's JD, John Dickinson, Guy Haberman, in for Murph and Marcus here on a Thursday. Good conversation with Maiocco, and Matty echoing a little of what you had to say, thinking that the 49ers do benefit if they wind up meeting the Ravens for having seen that defense and everything they tried to do to Brock Purdy. Oh. Lose Guy? Nope, we might have lost Guy there for a second.
Age of Zoom, I somehow muted I'm not on Zoom.
Oh.
But you would think everybody, after the last 5 years, would have figured out the last 3 years how to unmute themselves. I had my mic muted. Just a regular old mic mute, not even Zoom. Sorry. I was just going to say, JD, this Russell Wilson thing, where it's kind of reminiscent of Derek Carr getting benched, in the sense that part of it is they don't want him to get hurt. And then they owe him another $37 million on the guarantee. He hasn't even started playing on his 5-year, $245 million contract yet. They traded 2 1s, 2 2s, a 5th, and 3 players for Russell Wilson and a 4th. And you flip side that, the yin, the yang of it, with the McCaffrey trade, that was a 2, 3, 4, 5. And it just made me think a little bit of not getting Matthew Stafford, and how at the time it felt like this was a guarantee. Oh, Matthew Stafford, that's going to be the difference between a championship and not being a champion. And it was true. But at the time, remember, leading up to that, the other conversation was what about Deshaun? Should they trade for Deshaun Watson? Now that became more complicated, and that became a no-go. But then even that, his play, his contract, that's been terrible. Just if you limit it to game on-field stuff with him, which you can't do. You can't just limit it to on-field. And, here we are talking about a Warriors trade. And it all seems so obvious in the moment. This is the thing you should do. That's the thing that won't work. And I just look up and go, at the time, that McCaffrey trade was, all right, good trade, good player, but I don't know. That's a lot for this guy. And it's turned out to be a home run. And at the time for Russell, it felt like multiple teams would have done that deal. And it's, thank God they're owned by the Waltons, or they couldn't move on from him. Do you think every franchise in the league could financially afford to move on from Russell?
Yeah, I would imagine there's probably a handful that couldn't, after they had locked him into the deal that they did. I mean, I think some wouldn't. I mean, I'll be honest, I missed on this trade twice. I thought it was going to work last year. It was an unmitigated disaster. I give Sean Payton credit for at least trying to pretend like he wanted to give it an honest effort. And I think he did. It got off to a pretty brutal start. And for them to be, a game under 5, what are they, 7 and 8 now with a couple of games left? I mean, that, and Russ had played statistically, I think, better than I think most people would have anticipated. So, but for him to basically be able to move on, I really thought him and Peyton could work. But at this point, I think Peyton wants his own guy, which it makes a lot of sense.
And which makes to me, it makes the draft even more intriguing. That you're paying Sean Payton basically almost 20. He's making $18 million, plus he makes whatever he makes from his Lululemon endorsements, and he's a $20 million coach. So I guess if you're going to pay the coach $20 million, you got to do what he wants.
Well, and their draft picks are all kind of messed up too, and so I don't know. It made me think, all right, there's somebody already whether it's a free agent or somebody in the draft that he thinks would be attainable, that or a move to be made. Like, it made me think that he already believes there's a move to be made that could be an upgrade. So I'm kind of curious as to what that move would be, having maybe a more of a high regard for Sean Payton than I should at this point, kind of given the way things ended in New Orleans. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
That's like, you can't invest. Well, the guy can't. Yeah, Kirk. The guy just can't be expensive, right? Because you're paying. You're going to end up. There's going to be so much rust dead money depending on how they structure it.
So I think that makes things more problematic. But Kirk is the one that I think would be Kirk off an ACL would be the one, or off an Achilles. Sorry, it was Achilles, right? Yeah, it was Achilles. Yeah, my bad. Kirk off the Achilles, I think, could be an option to work, because I feel like they want to win immediately. So they're especially given, like, because they could have tanked, right? If they really wanted to tank, they could have tanked. They didn't tank, and now they're 7-8, and they're not going to have a top pick, and they wouldn't have a top pick anyway. So it just, I don't know. They're in a weird spot. So I would think that he doesn't move on if he doesn't have somebody lined up, maybe somebody that we're not thinking about that he thinks that he could go to. But yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on moving forward. All right, John Dickinson, Guy Haberman, in for Murph and Marcus here on a Thursday. We'll come back. 808 KNBR is the number. We'll get back into this Warriors conversation that we were having earlier surrounding Jonathan Kuminga, as the Dubs are back in action tonight against the Heat, first of 7 at home. 808 KNBR is the number to give us a call or shoot us a text here on the Sports Leader.
From the Chilton Auto Body Traffic Desk. Listen to the sports leader anywhere, anytime. Download the KNBR app. Murph and Marcus continue live from the KNBR Casino Matrix Studio. Casino Matrix progressive jackpots are here. Where are you? Just drop in. Please play responsibly. 1-800-GAMBLER.
Some years it's just really obvious who your top 9 are, and roll with those guys. And the guys 10 through 14 understand roles, and you work with them and you try to fit them in to keep them going. But this year is very different in that regard. I think we play 13 guys in the rotation. Any one of them every one of them is qualified to be out there, and could make the case that they should be out there, but you can only play 9 or 10. So very difficult decisions. I had to make one the other night, and Moses only played the 2-minute stretch in the second, and Moses has played well for us this year, and that was difficult. I talked to him before the game to let him know that was happening. But to your point, we get Gary back, we get Draymond back. Those questions get louder, and we have to figure that out as a staff.
All right, Steve Kerr, practice yesterday. Warriors' first of a 7-game homestand beginning tonight at Chase Center as they'll take on the Miami Heat. Dubs OT with JD tonight. We'll be talking about that one right here on The Sports Leader. And then Dallas on Saturday, and then it's a couple of days before the new year, and the homestand will continue next week and all the way through January 10th. 13 players that can play, Guy Haberman, but only want to play 9 or 10. That leaves quite the glut, and it's rearing its ugly head right now, even before Draymond Green and Gary Payton II work their way back into the fold. Jonathan Kuminga at the forefront of this, has been starting, has been playing well and finishing most games, didn't finish against the Nuggets, and then had some comments to Marcus Thompson of The Athletic, expressing some frustration, his belief in himself, first and foremost, saying, I'm a difference maker. I know I am, but it's not up to me to do certain things. How can I say it? It's not up to me to control my minutes. I feel like I've done that, but the last voice ain't mine, and it's not easy because I know I can score the basketball. I know how to pass. I know how to do different things on the floor, but it's about putting it all together. We'll end the quote there. Frustrated. He wants to be a part of the action and doing more. I think Steve Kerr would probably tell you, a guy, that he believes that Kuminga's doing everything right, but doing everything right doesn't mean you're going to finish every single game pending matchups or who else is playing well.
Let me ask you a question, JD. In football terms, if Jonathan Kuminga were on the 49ers, which 49er is he? Is he Juwan Jennings, or is that not a big enough role?
Well, Juwan Jennings would not be a big enough role for Kuminga, I think.
I'm just asking, what is the way this team is set up? What should he be? Because in football, Juwan Jennings is hopefully he'll get his contract. But right now, they're a different team without Juwan Jennings. But everybody understands that Juwan Jennings can't get 7 targets a game also, right?
The first guy that comes to mind, you're going to laugh. The first guy that comes to mind is Elijah Mitchell. Everybody thinks Stop. What do you mean? What? Well, no, everybody got to get Elijah Mitchell in more.
Yeah, but that you're talking about what Twitter says. I'm talking about what is the reality of where the roles are defined on the team.
No, Kuminga has a bigger,
we could
more impactful role than Mitchell. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, come on, you're just trying to get under my skin. So is it so? Am I hot, or do I need somebody with more production than Jennings to get to Kuminga?
I feel like, Jennings is interesting because Jennings does, I think, for the most part, do everything that Kyle Shanahan wants him to do. If Jennings wanted a bigger role and was kind of, low-key or maybe even not so low-key speaking about it in the media, I think if Jennings was like, man, I should be averaging 5 catches a game in addition to everything else I'm doing that nobody sees, that the coaching staff loves, then I think it would be a better comp. But no, look, Kuminga's been impactful and he's been playing well. But I don't know. That's an interesting question. That's a tough one.
It's not fair, right? Because football's different than basketball in terms of what a quote unquote a contribution is. And A and B, the Niners are the 1 seed right now. So nobody really, you don't complain when you're the 1 seed. And that's not the position the Warriors are in. So my question for you, JD, is over under 50, 60, what percent do you put it at that this team makes a trade, like a significant trade, to thin their roster out a little bit?
I think it's 50-50 right now, because part of the problem is that I think the depth that they have is what allows them to make it through these stretches where they are a little bit shorthanded and play better than you may think on the surface that they're going to play. Right? Draymond Green goes out, indefinite suspension, and my initial thought is, well, this team's going to struggle to win games, and they're 5-2 in the games since Draymond's been suspended. And so they've been able to withstand the loss of him, and I think that could sort of lead to a bigger picture conversation about his impact and the things he brings to the table, the positive negative equation. Is there more negatives now that are outweighing positive? That's sort of a separate conversation on Draymond. But to bring it back to the depth, I think they have the depth to withstand some players being out, because others are able to get more opportunities to play, and they can remain, let's say, around that middling 500 mark. If you start taking that depth away and you still have players in and out of the lineup, maybe you become less equipped to be a team that can hang on in the inevitable time where you're going to have players out, as every NBA team does every season. What I'm getting at, though, is they haven't, when they've been fully whole, been able to get the depth right. And I think so. That's the problem. Like they're better off, at least they have been this year, when Steve Kerr basically knows the 9 or 10 guys that are going to play. Like, he doesn't have to worry about not playing Trace Jackson-Davis right now, or Kuminga, or even Podziemski, because Draymond Green and Gary Payton II are out, and Andrew Wiggins has been out. So it makes it easy. Those guys are going to play. Here are their roles. Go get it. And then they go get it, and they play effectively, and they help this team win. And then the veteran players come back who should be adding to this team and making them significantly better, but then it just turns into guys that have been playing and helping maybe are going to play less. So I think that's the trick to this whole thing, is that you can say this team's 13 deep, but you can't play 13 when you have everybody, and they've found it harder on a night-in, night-out basis to play the right 8 or 9 on a given night to help them win. And part of that is the decline or inconsistency of, for a good chunk of the beginning of the year, Klay Thompson, for really the whole year except for maybe 5 or 6 games, Andrew Wiggins, and Draymond Green being in and out of the lineup at the extent that he has been. So this team has depth, but in many ways that depth is just not – it's been depth when they've been shorthanded more than depth when they have everybody, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. Which is season depth, not postseason depth. Right? Those are two different things.
Right, because you want to be Denver. You want to know that it's going to be Jamal Murray, and it's going to be Porter Jr., and it's going to be Gordon, and it's going to be Jokic, and it's basically going to be Kentavious Caldwell-Pope that are going to be out there at the end of games for the Nuggets. Now, maybe there's one player off the bench that subs in for somebody. Last year they had Bruce Brown who did it. They had some more options, I think, last year than this. But they know they're 5. And it's they've got MVPs and future Hall of Famers among that group, at least one, and they all play well together, and they practice together, and that's how you win it. The Warriors have been there in the past. The Warriors knew. In the heyday of the Warriors, they knew. Steph, Clay, Draymond, Harrison Barnes for a couple of years that turned into Kevin Durant, and it was going to be those 4 for sure. And Iguodala was going to be the 5th in the first run, and then it turned into, in the 2022 run, maybe it was Looney, maybe it was GP2. Maybe it was Otto Porter. There were basically 4 different options for one spot. I think you can get away with having one spot. The problem that the Warriors have right now, Guy, is they have 6 players that are basically competing for 2 spots on a nightly basis if you're guaranteeing the core 3 their spots, which I think you are with Steph and Clay, and maybe even eventually Draymond. And so they almost are going to have to go back to the drawing board when they get everybody back and figure out how the pieces meld, or figure out if there's a better opportunity to make a trade. Can you get a player that's a bona fide finisher in exchange for a couple of players that aren't going to get the run that they want when this team is fully whole?
Yesterday, Kurt Warner was on the show, and he was talking about Brock's interceptions, and he said, the one thing you have to have as a quarterback is when you throw a third pick, you got to go, all right, well, I guess I got to go make a play. And then you throw a fourth pick, and you think, well, I guess that really means I got to go make a play. That's the attitude you have to have. And I think of that while you're talking about this lineup, because there's really something to be said for a player to know it's okay if I'm 3 of 12 shooting in the first half. That doesn't change the fact that I'm a finisher, right? And it definitely puts stress on the coach to have to manage that chemistry every single game to make sure that it's all even, not even from a minute standpoint, but just make sure that the chemistry is right at the end. But today you got more of liquid A and less of liquid B and less of liquid C, and so you got to, you're it's baking, it's not cooking, right? Where the measurements, like something being a little off is going to be a 3-point loss instead of a 3-point win. And, part of the challenge, it's 100% the challenge for the coach, but it's also a challenge for players. And I don't think it's totally selfish of a player to say, I want to be in a position where I know I'm going to get to play my way out of a mistake or play my way out of, whatever, which is when you're not a championship contender initially, you get to. Steph and Clay got to play a lot of minutes, right? For all of the things that Mark Jackson got criticized for, what did he get the most credit for? Giving those guys an unwavering green light. And who's to say if they had a more micromanaging coach early in their careers, could anything have been different for them? It's why I was so wrong about Trey Lance fitting in with the Niners. Oh, what more would a young quarterback want than this team that's so well built around him? Well, the downside of that is if the guy's not ready to play like a Super Bowl contender, then he's not going to have a long leash. And it's the same thing here, right? It's like, how do you get that experience if you only get it when you are playing your best? And that's not I'm not saying that the Warriors should be doing anything differently in terms of how they manage the roster in game, but I do understand the feeling of, well, how am I going to learn how to play through this stuff if I'm off on that particular day? That means I watch all night long, and it's really just enough. It is the result of when you have that many numbers. There's no other way around it.
And I think that's the Kuminga issue specifically. I think that's his issue. He feels he's a difference maker.
Right.
It's not up to him as far as the minutes go. He wants to be able to make the plays that he can make while also being able to work through some mistakes. And look, I think he sees that he's a better player when he plays with better players. And I think, that's the other part of it. So he's thinking, hey, I want to play with Steph and Clay because I look like a different guy when I play with those guys. Forget about this, put me in the 10-minute-a-game box when you've got everybody back and have me play a bunch of bench minutes with lesser players, although the Warriors bench collectively has been awesome throughout the course of this year. So I think there's that. I think there's the night-to-night of it. As you listen to KNBR AM and FM San Francisco, the sports leader, a Cumulus Media station, it's JD and Guy Haberman here on a Thursday in for Murph and Marcus. 808 KNBR is the number. 808 KNBR. What do the Warriors do? Because it is, Guy, about the night-to-night right now as this team tries to win, but it also is about the trade deadline, which is coming up on February 8th. How about that? The trade deadline coming up before the Super Bowl. So that is something to keep an eye on. Do the Warriors have to make a bigger picture move? And does it involve looking to move off of veterans to open up slots for younger players who have performed well lately? Or does it turn into a scenario where they look to package some of the younger players who may be unhappy with their role in an attempt to bring back a more veteran player or a young prime veteran player that they know can be plug and play on a night in, night out basis? That is quite the conundrum, but I think those two things are what the Warriors face, both micro and macro guy.
Kawakami's column, he suggested, he wasn't saying this is what you should do, but he said, could it be a trade like Kuminga and Chris Paul for Pascal Siakam? Or OG Anunoby?
And then, yeah, I mean, to me, that's the kind of move that I think if Wiggins proved himself to be back, I think that's the kind of move that the Warriors may find themselves wanting to consider. Because here's the other part of the Kuminga equation. The Warriors have to look in the mirror and ask themselves how they truly view Jonathan Kuminga's ceiling with this organization, with the way that they plan to be for the next 2 years, 2 to 3 years, let's say, with Steph and Draymond and potentially Clay if he comes back. And then also, do they believe Jonathan Kuminga is a number 2 option alongside Steph Curry or a number 3 option alongside Steph, and if Clay comes back, moving forward, that you can make a deep run with? And if you don't think he can be that in the next couple of years, then you're going to have to extend him, basically. He's extension eligible this coming October in 2024 with a year left on his deal. Now, they've already picked up his 4th-year option, but he's extension eligible, and or you play out the year and then you can make him a restricted free agent and match any offer. But I think that the underlying part of this, too, is Kuminga's probably going to want a payday indicative of the player that he believes he's going to be, even more than the player he's been to this point. So now you have to factor all of that in to the equation. But I think Kuminga really is the crux of this, because I think the Warriors like what he's been over the last couple of weeks as a role player, but they don't love the fact that even when he's doing things that they want, he's seemingly unhappy. Because he was unhappy last year when he wasn't doing things that they want. So now he's doing the things that they want, and I think they were hopeful that he would be cool with an expanded role if he was playing a way that they wanted him to play, but he's still not happy with it. So I do think the Warriors are going to have to look at the potential of making a trade, but I believe more in what Kawakami is putting out there, not reporting, but just putting out there as a theory. I believe they'd be more inclined to look at something like that than looking at clearing the glut of, say, Andrew Wiggins and somebody else to open the door for Kuminga. Like that, because I think that's what it comes down to, right? It comes down to, do you want to open the door for Kuminga, or do you want to trade Kuminga for somebody that you think is a more playable, consistent fit around the other players that you have on this roster?
Yeah. And what do you think do you think they think he's a number 2, right? Part of this is Steph has remained in such incredible physical condition and has remained the player that he's been in an extended prime, is how I would describe. That's what Steph has right now, right? Like on paper, there are, I'm sure, some things, but on paper, he is, based on age, he is playing much better, much closer to prime than most guys do at this point in their career. So Steph has extended his prime to the point that you need to refresh who his number 2 guy is soon.
And that's the question. And I don't think that they think Kuminga is that. I think Kuminga thinks he might be at that. And I think Kuminga may look around the room right now and think to himself, well, I'm already better than Wiggins, and hell, Draymond's not here half the time. And, like, you give me those minutes, I'm just as productive, and I can be that guy. I mean, I think he has all the confidence in the world. Again, I don't think the things that he said to Marcus Thompson necessarily come from a bad place. They come from a belief in himself that he can be, as he said, a difference maker in all of these different ways. But, for Kuminga to also say, quote, I've got to take that away, the ability, basically that nobody can guard him, the mentality that nobody can guard him, I've got to take that away, he said, to make sure my OGs get the ball. That's where it's confusing. And it just, again, there's this belief that he's already kind of among that caliber of player, to where, how could the Warriors read that? And I know Steve Kerr said it wasn't a big deal, but how could the Warriors read that and not think that's a problem, that's who he thinks he is as a player at this point? I mean, it's again, they're saying all the right things because I don't think they want to hurt his confidence. I also don't think they want to hurt his trade value if they look to make a move on him in the next 7 weeks.
Which is, that's a fine line to walk. I think a lot of times people aren't. I think it's pretty hard to fool teams with that stuff too. Like, they're paying attention. They know what's up.
No doubt.
Right.
Well, and I think they, he didn't have a lot of value.
We're past the days
3 weeks ago.
You think he had more or less?
No, I think he had less 3 weeks ago. I think he has more now, but I think the Warriors are trying to not upset the apple cart with acting like the comments were outrageous, where internally I would bet they're pretty annoyed by it. I would bet internally they're like, really? Like, really? Like, you're doing everything we want, and we're actually really happy with you right now, and you say that. Like, that, I think that's how they reacted to it.
Well, it's fully understandable. Also, if you're trading for Jonathan Kuminga, you're not trading for Jonathan Kuminga to play him 23 minutes a night. You're trading for Jonathan Kuminga because you agree with him, and you want to give him the space to spread his wings, JD. That's why you would acquire him. So a team that would acquire him, I don't know that they'd be scared off by those comments, because they're in a different place. They're not looking for a guy to come in and fit in if they acquire him. They're looking for
but you want to buy low. You do want to buy low, and I think other teams around the league feel like Kuminga is a talent that they could maybe get lower than value for because of the fact that he's not either flourishing with the Warriors or he's unhappy even when he is flourishing with the Warriors. It's a good conversation. Let's keep this rolling. 808 KNBR is the number. We'll pause here. We also have our cooler of content to get to between now and 11 o'clock. It's John Dickinson and Guy Haberman in for Murph and Marcus on the Sports Leader.
Sunnyvale, shout out to you for supporting KNBR. Sunnyvale Sports Leader.
Here's what's trending now.
Trending now.
On KNBR.com.
When asked about facing the Commanders, Kyle Shanahan said all teams are scary, and Jacoby Brissett has won a lot of games in this league, so Washington has just as good a chance to win as anybody against the 49ers. That story and more trending now on KNBR.com and the KNBR app.
Marcus keep rolling on the Sports Leader and streaming live on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
I think Wiggs has been a nice addition. You know, the way I look at it, Chris and Dario kind of anchor that second group. They're the constants, and we've tried different people around them, but those two guys in every lineup combination fare really well. So that unit is really based around them, but Wiggs has really given that group another attacker and a post-up guy. You saw in Denver, he scored 3 or 4 hoops right at the rim. And that's what we need from Wiggs. But he can do that with the starting group, too. So if he keeps playing well, then he very well could end up back in the starting lineup. But, you know, we're just kind of taking it day by day.
Steve Kerr there on Andrew Wiggins, best player on the floor for the Warriors Monday, Christmas afternoon against the Denver Nuggets. Warriors back at it tonight. I will have Dubs OT for you here on the Sports Leader. Coming up right around 9:30, right at the final horn of the Warriors and the Miami Heat, and following every Warriors game here on KNBR and on YouTube and Twitch. We appreciate, Guy, everybody watching on YouTube and Twitch throughout the morning, as we are on until 11 o'clock here on the Sports Leader before we get you to the Pinstripe Bowl, which is coming up. We got a full day of college bowl action here on KNBR. Wanted to get to a text here on the Golden State Lumber and Building Materials text line, 309, and there's been a couple of these. 309, Dubs fans are in on Kuminga as a star for this squad. How much do you think the fan base complicates anything? Because I do think it's a unique situation. And look, organizations are not listening to fans, but Kuminga does have this
Bad
weird...
ones are.
Well, and I don't think the Warriors are that. At least they've proven themselves not to be over the last decade plus. But I think it's a good point. But I think when you look at this, there is an interesting pressure. Like I've said this before. I think we talked about it yesterday. Kuminga does move the needle. Like people, like media members like talking about him. People like writing about him. The fan base likes talking about it. Like it. He is somebody, I think, because of the athletic and in some ways complementary talent when he's playing well to the other players that the Warriors have. But I also think there's a bit of, you know, I don't want to call it desperation, but just the thought that there has to be the next wave. Like there has to be a headliner to the next wave, right? Like this Warriors dynastic run can't just end with a thud and nothing to be shown for moving forward, right? Like, so I think he is the guy that flashes. I think, you know, Pajemski's been really good, and Trace Jackson-Davis has been steady and really impactful over a handful of games here lately. Moses Moody's been, I think, for the most part, a better playoff player than he has been a regular season player. He always tends to be the guy that gets caught in the wash. But Kuminga is the guy who makes the plays that make you think there might be star potential in him down the line. Yeah.
It's, you know, he's a guy you drafted very highly and has looked like a guy that gets drafted very highly. That's part of it, too. When you get drafted in the lottery, he drafted in the top half of the lottery, and the Warriors have not drafted a lot in the lottery, let alone the top half of the lottery since, you know, Harrison Barnes. It's really just Wiseman. Moody was just on the outside of it. That's the other thing. Like, you step into the thing with a bunch of hype, and then we look at you and go, "Oh man, there's something here." So, yeah, I get it. Like I think it is a lot of what you just said, which is you can sense, and this is where I think from a fan base standpoint and an organizational standpoint, they're probably on the same page. What comes after Steph matters to the people watching every night. And what happens after Steph matters to the people paying the bills to Joe Lacob. It matters a lot, right? This thing has been the Warriors as an organization have been a machine, JD. And not only do you not want it to stop, you need it to keep going because you've invested in the machine. So I think that's where everybody's kind of aligned, fan base and organization alike. They'd have to be. In there being this sort of desperation to figure out what comes next. So there isn't just a thud. And a rebuild. Nobody wants a rebuild.
No, nobody wants a rebuild, and I think there is a lot of promise that the Podziemskis and the Kumingas and the Trace Jackson Davises have shown here of late, and they've been winning. It's not just that they've been playing; they've been legitimately helping this team win. Basically, as Steph and Klay have led the way. Klay has come around and played some of his best basketball up until the Christmas game over the course of the last 5, 6, 10, 12 games prior, depending upon how far you really want to go back. Really, more specifically, the 5 or 6 games prior, he's been much more like the old great Klay. And then it's been those 3, basically, that I've mentioned, along with Chris Paul and Saric being peppered in, who have really been the extension of the lot of the winning. 808 KNBR, the number. I wanted to get one more text in from the 831 on the Golden State Lumber and Building Materials text line. And because I do think this speaks not all, but for a good chunk of the fan base, they need to trade the old guys. Kuminga's been playing great, will just get better. Wiggins has shown he's not into it. The rub, though, is when Wiggins shows that he is into it, and he did on Christmas, he's a guy you absolutely want to have on the floor. When you deem that Wiggins and Kuminga can't play together, but you would prefer Wiggins over Kuminga if both are playing at their best, at least what their best has been and what we've seen their best to be, then I think it actually may lead to the opposite. But that is the question. And the reason I read that one, Guy, is the question is, do you look to clear veterans to play the young guys more, or do you look to supplement the veterans by trading a young guy or two for somebody else who can be fit right in, that night in, night out is going to be a player that you want to finish games with? Because the problem now is the Warriors have, and it's Steve Kerr's tried to mask it as a nice problem to have, but it's a problem. The fact that you only know 40 or 60% of your closing lineup on a night-in, night-out basis, depending upon Steph, Klay, and whether Draymond's around or not. And then you've got 6, 7 players that you have to try to because not all players are positionally the same. Like, Steve Kerr likes to have Chris Paul or Podziemski out there with Steph and Klay right now. He just does, and he thinks they're a better team for it. And so one of those guys right now is finishing. If Wiggins is playing well, he's probably finishing. And so that means Kuminga is not. Moses Moody gets lost in the wash altogether. If Draymond's playing, maybe Trace Jackson Davis isn't. So, and then I think you made the greatest point of all, which is they're 15-15 and not even in the play-in tournament right now. So whatever it is, like we're talking about the last 7 games as if it's working, which it has, but this team overall is not working at the level in which they believe they could be. And is that more on the veterans or the young players? I think you could make the case that's probably been more on the veterans, Klay, Wiggins, Draymond, than it has been the young players who have garnered opportunities. But do you believe that is more likely to stick? So a lot of that is just the conundrum that the Warriors find themselves in over the course of these next 6+ weeks as they head toward the trade deadline. Let's sneak in Gary in Daly City on the Sports Leader. 808 KNBR, the number. What's going on, Gary? You're on with JD and Guy.
Hey, guys. Been a fan since 65. I hate when guys run to the media. Old school, you keep things in-house. You got something to say. I'm sure you talked to Kerr, but say it. But let's pump the brakes on Kuminga. We've seen the negatives and all the mistakes he's made. All of a sudden, he's got some highlight films. Just pump the brakes a little bit, okay? The media's running with this story. Just pump it a bit and also show him all the things he's done wrong. Because you got to learn from your mistakes before all of a sudden you blossom. Number 2, their turnovers are the main problem with this team. That's Curry. Turnovers. That's why Chris Paul's there. Their second unit at times has outplayed the first unit. Many a time. They brought him back in games. But you take their turnovers where they are in the league, right near the bottom, to move them in the middle, that'd be a lot more wins. The handling of the basketball. 3, every team in the league sees what they're going to have. You guys, everybody in the media talks trade. Who's going to want their contracts? You want Draymond's contract? You want Wiggins' contract? No. You got to play this out. And I understand about you got to play it out. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Appreciate the call. 808 KNBR.
I mean, that's where you're throwing an expiring.
Yeah,
that's where you're throwing. That's where Chris Paul's contract comes into play.
Yeah, it's not about nobody's trading. I don't think. Maybe you disagree with me. I don't think anybody's trading for Draymond right now, and I don't think the Warriors want to trade Draymond right now this year plus 3 more on his deal. What we're talking about is Wiggins and or Chris Paul, basically among the veteran group. And I think what we're talking about among the young players is I think really Kuminga and Moody. I don't think they're looking to move Podziemski or Trace Jackson Davis, given how impactful they've been at 2 months into their careers.
I want to go back to the Wiggins thing for a second, because the question with him is, can you win a championship expecting the inconsistency? It was one thing to do it 2 years ago when he had a career year, right? He was an all-star, and the team he had around him was better. But now we're 2 years later, and I think you can less afford the inconsistency, the unpredictability that comes with waiting for, boy, if he plays like he played against Denver, look out. But, that's 5 years of that. Like, you just know what it is. You accept it. That's part of the deal. But I think the worst thing you can do is plan for consistency from him. And unless you're saying that's the only chance you have, if that's the only chance you have, that's the only chance you have. But I don't think you can plan on it. I don't think you can operate like that is the path you must take if you have another option.
And equally, I think you can't plan on the fact that Kuminga is just going to continue to get better. I think you have to also understand that he's going to have ups and downs. So if Kuminga is your backup plan to Wiggins, I think that also is a faulty backup plan. Not that he can't continue to be the player that he has been. I think he can continue to be the player that he has been. But is he going to get better? And maybe he does, but I think we're 2 years away from that ceiling being hit, probably.
So here we are talking about it all, and the conclusion you just reached is the best course of action with the two of them is to just figure out on a nightly basis which one should play, which is what they're doing. We're back at the beginning of the circle here.
Which is what they're doing short term. That's what they're doing short term. And I think longer term it comes out in the wash, but Draymond and Gary Payton coming back complicates things, I think, for Kuminga more than anybody, because Steve Kerr trusts both of those guys to be on the floor at the end of games more consistently than he trusts Kuminga. Kuminga's found his way on the floor because it's basically been a him or Wiggins conversation, and Wiggins either hasn't been present or hasn't played well, which has made it easy. It's going to get a lot harder for Kuminga, and he's going to have to play well with lesser opportunity, which I think has been the biggest problem he's had. He plays pretty well when he gets the opportunity. He doesn't play well when that role is limited, but that role needs to be limited because there's other good players you want to get on the floor back into the fold. So, yeah, it's a conversation that's not going anywhere. I'm sure we'll be having it tonight on Dubs OT after the Warriors take on the Heat. All right, 808 KNBR is the number. We got a half hour to go before we get folks to the Pinstripe Bowl. We've got your cooler of content coming up next. It's John Dickinson and Guy Haberman here on the Sports Leader.
The following is a test of the emergency alert system.
This has been a test of the emergency alert system. We now return to our regular programming.
All right, everyone, chill. This is the Cooler. You're not sending me to the Cooler of content.
Sponsored by Mancini Sleep World. Sleep better, live better. Visit sleepworld.com. And by Marin Health. Marin Health Medical Center and Marin Health Medical Network world-class care. Closer than you think.
On the Sports Leader.
Guy, I know you're a big fan of the reaction to the reaction. Well, we may have the reaction to the reaction to the reaction here on the Cooler of Content on the Sports Leader. You ready for that?
Let's go take me down the rabbit hole.
Let's go down the rabbit hole. Well, it started with Deebo Samuel's reaction on the Up and Adams show. He's a guest of Kay Adams on the regular on that program. And Deebo was reacting to Cam Newton and Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons had said, quote, down 21.
Those are podcasters for people who aren't aware. They're both podcasters.
Exactly. Right.
But I have nothing but the utmost respect.
Of course. Right. Not sliding that. You want to promote your own podcast, Guy? You can do that.
No, keep going.
Parsons, quote, down 21, and there's no shots or development throws. Should tell you all you need to know. So here was the reaction from Deebo with Kay Adams.
First of all, Cam Newton stopped texting my phone, bro. He was a fan like 2 weeks ago. Like, that's mad crazy. Like, you wanted me on your podcast after talking about my quarterback, which is funny to me. But anyway, back to this Michael Parsons story. Like, bro, we beat you 42 to, like, whatever the score may be. Like a long time ago. Like, I don't get why he's so bothered about what we got going on over here, whatever the case may be. And I don't understand, like, you saying, like, you can be a quarterback in this offense. Like, I don't understand where you're going with that.
Yeah, and so the last part reference to Cam Newton, right? And basically, Cam Deebo, he's texting me basically. So here was Cam Newton on Deebo saying to stop texting him.
I love this day and age that we're in because it gives so many people opportunities to kind of speak on things in real time, right? Something that just hit my desk in regards to Kay Adams. I love her, by the way. Need to get her on 4th and 1. But she kind of stretched the truth when talking to Deebo Samuels in regards to the ha, or Cam said ha. I used the monocle emoji, basically saying, like, what's going on here? Not to retract my statement. I said what I said, or in this case, I emojied what I emojied. Now, Deebo, my guy, been a fan, still a fan. You must stop the cap, bro. Now, my point is this. You said something like, Cam, stop calling my phone. I'm like, motherfucker, I don't got your number. Whoever calling you, that ain't my phone calling you. And it was so believable that I had to go back on I said, hold on. Did I reach out to Deebo? I said, that was believable. But I already got your number to call you or reach out to you. And if I do, put it out there for the people to see. I want the receipt because maybe somebody reaching out to you that I don't necessarily know. But it wasn't me, homeboy. Nah, I don't like that. So whoever the calling you, Deebo, it ain't me, bit, bro. But I still with you. And I know, emotional about the loss, and you defended your teammate as you should. So I'm not gonna sit up here and be like, no, bro, go see. No, I'm still a fan, bro. You feel me?
All right, so Cam Newton there. The response of the response about Deebo intimating that Cam had been texting him, and basically Cam saying, that's somebody else. I don't even have your number. So, yeah, we've got the reaction to the reaction to the reaction.
Yeah. And we've got, as you always do, you kind of attach to the wrong thing. Did Cam's producer reach out? Did somebody say, hey, you should go on Cam? My guy Cam, you got to go see my guy Cam. Like all of this, all of it crowds what Micah Parsons said. Who Micah Parsons, by the way, so he's got his YouTube show and Cam's got his YouTube show. I love that Cam said this just came across my desk. Like he's in the news, like it is, like he is like he's Cronkite. This just came. This just across the desk just now, ladies and gentlemen. News to report to you. So I love that this just came across my desk from Cam.
Something
I actually think deep in all of that is like a question about the initial criticism from Micah, right? Which was, I can barely remember at this point. We went so far down the rabbit hole, but was basically down 21. What? There was no straight drop back pass game. Is that what he was saying?
Yeah, down 21. No shots. I've got it.
Yeah.
Down 21, and there's no shots or development throws should tell you all you need to know.
So Micah early in the year was was all in on Brock. Very complimentary of Brock. Parsons was. And in all, like always, and I know because we're on the other side of it, where you talk for 3 hours, or you do a podcast, or I do a YouTube show, and there's a line that becomes, well, what about that? And it's like, yeah, well, what about all the other stuff, right? So I haven't heard. It's so cliche to say what's the context, but that's a legitimate thing to say. There is something to be said about the fact that the Niners offense just does not do. There goes DK down the field, 50-50 ball. We got to score in 2 plays. Let's score in 2 plays. There goes Justin Jefferson. There goes, right. The Niners hit a ton of explosives. On percentage of their offense, they hit a bunch. They hit several against the Ravens. What they do not do is receiver straight down the sideline, over the top, consistent 2 or 3 or 4 play scoring drives, right? It takes a little more management to get down the field, and they can pick up big chunks. So maybe that's what Mike is saying, is like they just don't. Now, that thing cuts both ways. Like Dallas does it. Dallas also, Dak will throw picks doing it. I don't know if you saw into the Browns game the other day, Flacco hit a gorgeous deep ball to Amari Cooper. Like 2 series later, he tried it again through a pick. So, it goes both ways. And I think part of the theory being like, hey, if we just do what we're supposed to do, we can get our way down the field. It's not 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Nobody thinks it's that. But I do think that's some of where the disagreements have come in on Purdy specifically, right? Some people are, quote unquote, pro Brock. Some people are, I don't think the eye test and the numbers match, anti Brock or whatever. Some people are in the middle. And I do think a lot of it is like Micah kind of hit on the crux of it, which is I see all these explosive plays, and when you watch them, they're there. But it doesn't look the way it looks when Josh Allen throws a deep ball. It doesn't look the way it looks when Dak or Hurts. Like, where are the 3-play scoring drives, whatever? So maybe that's what Mike is getting at. And it's true. Like, that's just not a part of what this offense does. They do it differently, and they do it part of what they do is based on efficiency, and they are more efficient than anybody. They do it better than anybody. And you could argue that some of those deep shot balls that you want, they're not efficient. They're inefficient plays. So I'm not exactly sure what Micah's point was exactly, but I don't know. I don't doubt that they can win a championship doing it their way.
No doubt. And and he was. Let's be honest. I mean, he was taking a shot, and he doesn't think that.
And who at Brock? You think he was taking a shot at Brock? Is that what that was?
I think he's taking a shot at Brock. Yeah, I think he's taking a shot at Brock. I think he's basically saying, Brock, you're a system. Let me translate it. I think he's saying you're a system quarterback. You guys got down. The system was broken, and you didn't see, basically Kyle trust you to grip it and rip it in the way maybe other quarterbacks would need to do it from down big. That was my interpretation. I mean, I'm not saying it's right or I even agree, but I think
it's also a criticism of the receivers. I think it's also a criticism of the receivers, and maybe Debo took it as such, right?
Yeah,
I
think that's
could
possible.
Brock throw 50-50 balls to DK? Of course. His arm's strong enough for that.
Definitely.
That's not where but that's not where this offense is at its best.
By the way, Cam Newton asked for the receipts. Debo put the receipts out there. Now we don't know.
That's not real.
Debo did. Yeah. Well, that's why I'm setting that up. Yeah. Debo did put out.
Sorry.
But no, he did put out. What I guess Debo interpreted as being Cam Newton, or somebody affiliated with Cam Newton. The text is, yo, Debo, it's Cam, trying to have you on the pod next week, or in the next few weeks, hit me back. And I guess this was from a guy, Ace, who's basically, I don't know, a producer or something. Who is this? It's Cam. Who you trying to, I don't know who
this has
is.
to be fake. All the it looks like
I don't
Greek.
know. I know, but he says, I don't know who this is. It's Cam Newton. And then he goes, F you, Debo. Debo laughs. Good. And then it was good game, bro. Y'all look good. This was on Monday.
Has to be.
And yeah, exactly.
Debo has to be messing around with that, right? Cam doesn't actually text with all those hieroglyphics the way that he tweets. That's the joke.
That has to be the joke, but it does say, good game, bro. Y'all look good. This from Cam to Debo. Going silent now. Yeah. All right, bro. Lose my number. We can have a problem.
This across my desk.
And then going on Kay Adams' show, talking about me, wouldn't expect less, little bro. Focus on yourself, pup. So, I mean, now that sounds like it might have been Cam Newton.
That does sound real. For the record, I'm not a Cam Newton. I know when Cam had some things to say a couple weeks ago, some people were like Cam Newton dismissers. I'm not a Cam Newton dismisser. I am interested in what Cam has to say.
100%.
The guy won the MVP.
I think some people are like, MVP.
He doesn't know. Like, he can't. He doesn't have the right. Like, I am not. To be very clear, I'm not in that boat.
There was a time where Cam Newton was among the it quarterbacks in the league, and that was in an era where there was still Tom and Aaron and a bunch of other guys, Phillip Rivers. I mean, he was Big Ben. I mean, Cam was the MVP. It was a 15-1 team. He had a real good run, no doubt about it. So I'm with you on that part of it. I want to get, before we call it a morning here on the Sports Leader, hand it off to the Pinstripe Bowl. This Jair Alexander deal. So Jair Alexander went out for the coin toss, even though he wasn't a team captain. Then he winds up getting suspended. So here's Jair Alexander of the Packers, why he was out for the coin toss, even though he wasn't a team captain, which you're not allowed to be out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's only suiting. I don't think Coach knew I was from Charlotte, so.
So you just did that on your own?
I mean, it was like the guys backed me up, so they knew I was from here.
Did you realize you almost made a big mistake on the call, though?
What'd I do?
Well, you said we want to go on defense.
Yeah.
Which, in theory, they could have said, then you're electing to kick off, which you would have lost the opportunity then to receive in the second half.
Yeah, no, I told them that. I said I want our defense to be out there, and they all looked at me like I was crazy. I'm like, I mean, it's pretty simple what I said. Like, I want the defense to be out there. They like, you mean defer? I'm like, yeah, I guess.
Okay. Did he say that to you?
Yeah, he did.
The mic was on.
We heard you.
Oh, really? Nah, he was just like, defer? I was like, yeah. Everybody was like, yeah. Everybody was laughing. I'm like, what y'all laughing at? It's pretty obvious what I'm asking for.
So did anyone say anything to you when you got back to the sideline?
Why would they?
Oh, my. I mean, so Jair Alexander, he goes rogue. He damn near botches the coin toss. And then he wound up getting suspended by Matt LaFleur for conduct detrimental to the team. Before we hear LaFleur's explanation, I mean, just any comment on that? That is among the wildest things I think that have ever happened in an NFL game. He just goes out for the coin toss because I'm from the area, man. I wanted to be out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it bears noting that defer isn't in everybody's. A lot of people don't use the word defer a lot. Defer is a more complicated word than we use.
It's a coin toss specific word, though.
Yeah, it's a coin toss specific word. It's not coming up a lot in official conversations. But everyone just kind of knows the context of it based on the coin toss. So he did not seem to understand. Even there at the end, he was like,
he didn't.
Yeah,
he was like,
whatever.
no, we wanted to go on defense, which is not what you want to do. Like, to me, he was tripling or quadrupling down. It was a bad take, and then he quadrupled down on the bad take.
I have more to say, but should I wait for the next? You want to play another?
Let's hear LaFleur real quick, okay. and then we'll give you the last word on this. So here's Matt LaFleur on Jair Alexander being suspended.
It's unfortunate that we're at that juncture, and felt like it was in the best interest long term for our team and for Jair, and certainly it was a tough decision, especially kind of where we're at right now, and one we don't take lightly, but there's standards that we're all held accountable for, and when they're not met, unfortunately, sometimes you got to take some drastic measures. However, I will say that we are expecting we'll get him back and we're looking forward to get him back. I think we had a long conversation this morning. I thought it was very productive, and I think in the long run, although it's painful now, I think we're all going to be better for this moving forward.
All right, so there you go. Matt LaFleur on the suspension and Jair Alexander getting out of pocket there in the coin toss. Final thought to you, Guy Haberman.
Well, just understand when he says it's tough given the position we're in, they are benching. They are one of their best players in a must-win game. They've got a head-to-head game with Minnesota. They're both 7-8. They're both fighting for the last playoff spot in the NFC. This is a huge game for Green Bay, and so that makes it doubly worse.
No doubt, and just again, one of the wildest things you'll ever see. Honestly, I can't remember anything like that. Guy, great stuff. We'll do it again tomorrow. Looking forward to it. For Guy and for Tony and for Kyle, I'm JD. We're back tomorrow, 6 a.m. tomorrow. Pinstripe Bowl next, right here on KNBR, the sports leader.
They like, you mean deferred? I'm like, yeah, I guess.
Okay.